It began not with a portal or a mystical summoning, but with a miscalculation. Deep in a galaxy far, far away, an Imperial hyperspace jump calculated to perfection by the Empire's finest navigators, intersected with a cosmic anomaly that shouldn't have existed. The fleet, led by the massive wedge-shaped superstar destroyer Executor, punched through the barrier between universes at superluminal speed. Space buckled. Dimensions screamed. And when the ships emerged from hyperspace, the stars were wrong. Grand Admiral Thrawn stood on the bridge of an Imperial Star Destroyer, his red eyes narrowing at the viewport displaying a blue-green planet hanging in an unfamiliar star system. "This is not our destination," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of someone who understood they'd crossed a threshold that couldn't be easily recrossed. Behind the initial fleet, reality tore wider. More Star Destroyers emerged, followed by support craft, troop transports, and finally, eclipsing even the Superstar Destroyer. The Death Star itself materialized near Earth's moon. Its super laser dish pointed toward the small planet below like the eye of an ancient god. On Earth, S.H.I.E.L.D.'s orbital sensors went haywire. "Director Fury, you need to see this." Agent Maria Hill's voice carried an edge of controlled panic as she pulled up the satellite feeds across every screen in the command center. The images showed ships, impossibly massive ships, appearing near the moon in formations that spoke of military precision and overwhelming force. Nick Fury leaned forward, his single eye tracking the wedge-shaped vessels that dwarfed anything humanity had put into orbit. "How many?" 37 capital ships and counting, sir. Plus one." Hill paused, zooming in on the spherical construct that had just emerged. One moon-sized battle station. Energy readings are off the charts. "Get me every Avenger, now." Fury's hand was already reaching for the red protocol phone. "And someone explained to me how an entire alien armada just appeared in our backyard without any warning." In the Sanctum Sanctorum in New York, the Ancient One's eyes snapped open from meditation. She saw the dimensional rupture in her mind's eye, a tear not created by magic or the Infinity Stones, but by technology and velocity intersecting with the delicate boundaries between realities. She saw ships of conquest, soldiers bred for war, and two presences that burned with dark power, unlike anything she'd encountered in centuries of mystical study. "This is not Dormammu's doing," she murmured, rising to her feet. "This is something else entirely." Across the Atlantic, Tony Stark's AI assistant Jarvis interrupted his work on the latest Iron Man suit upgrade. "Sir, I'm detecting massive gravitational anomalies near lunar orbit. S.H.I.E.L.D. is broadcasting an Avengers-level alert." Tony pulled up the sensor data and felt his stomach drop. He'd seen alien invasions before. The Chitauri had taught him that Earth was far from alone in the universe. But this was different. These ships were organized, militarized, and there were so many of them. "Jarvis, analyze those energy signatures. Oh, tell me what we're dealing with." "The weapons systems on those vessels are unlike anything in my database, sir. However, based on size and configuration, each of the smaller ships appears capable of planetary bombardment. The spherical construct." Jarvis paused, and if an AI could sound uncertain, he did. "Sir, the energy contained within that station could theoretically destroy a planet." Tony was already suiting up. "Get me Steve, Nat, and Thor. We need to know if these guys are here to talk or to conquer." In Wakanda, King T'Challa stood in the vibranium mine beneath the Golden City, his hand resting on the meteorite that had shaped his nation's destiny. His sister Shuri burst into the chamber, tablet in hand. "Brother, our satellites have detected—" "I know." T'Challa's voice was quiet. The heart-shaped herb connection to Bast had already shown him visions. Ships like metal wedges, soldiers in white armor, and a darkness that sought to consume worlds. Assemble the council. Wakanda can no longer remain hidden. On Asgard, Heimdall's golden eyes saw across the cosmos to Midgard, where ships from another reality entirely had materialized above the small blue world he was sworn to watch. He saw soldiers by the tens of thousands, weapons that could burn cities, and a sphere that contained enough destructive force to crack worlds apart. "My king," he called, turning from his post. "Midgard is threatened." Odin Allfather looked up from his throne, Gungnir in hand. "By what manner of foe?" "By an empire from beyond the borders of Yggdrasil itself. They carry technology of conquest and servants of a darkness I do not recognize." Heimdall's voice carried genuine concern. "My Prince Thor has taken interest in that realm. If these invaders mean harm, then we shall watch," Odin said carefully. "The Midgardians must prove themselves capable of defending their own world. But keep vigil, Gatekeeper. If they falter, Asgard will not stand idle." Aboard the Executor, Darth Vader stood before the massive viewport, his respirator breathing rhythmically as he surveyed the planet below. He could feel it through the Force. Billions of life signatures, far more concentrated than most civilized worlds. But there was something else. Patterns in the Force he'd never encountered before. Nexuses of power that didn't feel like Force sensitives, but burned nonetheless with energy that made the dark side within him stir with interest. "Lord Vader?" An Imperial officer approached with appropriate deference. "We've completed initial scans of the third planet. It's inhabited, designated Earth in their primitive transmissions. No unified government, multiple nation-states in various states of technological development. Some areas appear to possess advanced technology, others are barely industrial age. Orbital defenses." Vader's deep voice resonated through his mask. "Minimal. Primitive satellites, no energy shields, no plasma weapons, a few nuclear arsenals, but nothing that could threaten Star Destroyers." Vader continued to stare at the blue world. "There is power here, power beyond their technology." The officer hesitated. "My lord?" "Prepare a diplomatic transmission. The Emperor will wish to address this world before we proceed with subjugation." Vader turned from the viewport, his cape sweeping behind him. "And ready ground forces? If they refuse the Emperor's mercy, we will demonstrate the price of defiance." On Earth, every government with satellite capability was now aware of the fleet. Emergency sessions convened at the United Nations. Military forces went to high alert. And in a small apartment in Queens, Peter Parker looked up at the sky through his window, spider sense tingling with a warning that something very, very wrong had just arrived. The Avengers assembled at Stark Tower within the hour. Steve Rogers stood in his Captain America uniform, shield on his back. Natasha Romanoff checked her weapons with practiced efficiency. Her Bruce Banner looked uncomfortable but determined. Clint Barton had his bow ready. And Tony Stark, now fully armored in the Mark 45 suit, stood at the center of the room projecting a holographic display of the Imperial fleet. "Okay, so, good news and bad news," Tony began. "Good news, they haven't started shooting yet. Bad news, each of those ships carries enough firepower to level a continent. And that moon-sized thing? Jarvis thinks it's a planet killer." "Have they attempted communication?" Steve asked, ever the strategist. "Shield's trying to establish contact now, but..." The holographic display flickered and died. Every screen in Stark Tower, every television, every computer, every device capable of receiving a signal. suddenly displayed the same image. A figure in a dark hooded robe sat upon a throne, his face shadowed, but his eyes burning with a yellow intensity that seemed to pierce through the screen itself. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority, the certainty of one who had conquered a galaxy and saw no reason this world should be different. "People of Earth," Emperor Palpatine began, and though he smiled, there was no warmth in it, only the satisfaction of a predator that had cornered new prey. "I am Emperor of the Galactic Empire, sovereign of 1,000 worlds, master of the greatest military force your limited understanding can comprehend. You exist now at the pleasure of Imperial authority." Steve's jaw tightened. Tony's repulsors began to glow with barely contained energy. Bruce's eyes flickered green for just a moment. "I am not without mercy," Palpatine continued. "You will be given 72 hours to consider my offer. Surrender. Pledge loyalty to the Empire. Accept our governors, our laws, our order. In exchange, your world will be integrated into our civilization. You will know peace under Imperial rule." The Emperor's smile widened, and lightning seemed to flicker at his fingertips. "Refuse, and your primitive militaries will be obliterated. Your cities will burn, and that which you call home will be reduced to debris orbiting your sun as a lesson to any who would defy the Empire's will. The Death Star hangs above you, a moon of metal capable of destroying your entire planet with a single pulse of its super laser. I recommend you choose wisely." The transmission ended. The screens went dark. For a moment, no one in Stark Tower spoke. Then Steve Rogers, the man who'd faced down Hitler and Hydra and never once considered surrender, looked at his team. "We need Thor. We need everyone. Because we're not surrendering Earth to another tyrant." Tony nodded, his faceplate sliding up to reveal determined eyes. "Jarvis, send the signal. Every Avenger, every ally, every hero who's ever worked with us. Because in 72 hours, we're going to war with an empire." In Wakanda, T'Challa made his decision. The vibranium vaults would open. The technology his ancestors had hidden from the world would be revealed. Because if Earth fell, Wakanda fell with it. In Kamartaj, the Ancient One began preparations for a battle she'd hoped would never come. Magic against an empire that had conquered with steel and darkness. And in Asgard, Thor Odinson heard the news from Heimdall and immediately demanded the Bifrost be opened. His adopted home was threatened. His friends needed him. The 72-hour countdown had begun. Above Earth, Darth Vader stood beside his Emperor via holographic transmission, watching the small planet below with interest. "They will refuse," he stated simply. "Yes," Palpatine agreed, his yellow eyes gleaming. "And then we shall demonstrate what happens when primitives believe themselves capable of defying the Empire. Prepare the Death Star, Lord Vader. Let us give them a preview of their fate." The Empire had arrived, and the Marvel Universe would never be the same. If you want to see more crossover battles and unexpected universe collisions, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and universe you'd want to see in the comments below. Let's explore the infinite together. The 72-hour deadline hung over Earth like an executioner's blade. In that first hour after the Emperor's transmission, the world descended into controlled chaos. Governments scrambling, militaries mobilizing, and civilians flooding into underground shelters in cities that remembered the Chitauri invasion all too well. But the Avengers didn't have the luxury of panic. Steve Rogers stood at the head of the conference table in Stark Tower's operations center, a holographic star map rotating above the surface showing the Imperial fleet's positions. "Tony, what are we looking at tactically?" Tony manipulated the display with hand gestures, zooming in on individual Star Destroyers. Each of these wedge-shaped beauties is approximately 1,600 meters long. Jarvis estimates crew complements around 37,000 per ship, plus somewhere between 9,000 to 10,000 soldiers. They've got what appear to be turbo-laser batteries, energy weapons that our preliminary scans suggest could vaporize a city block per shot. And the small fighters? Natasha asked, studying the swarms of TIE fighters conducting patrol routes around the capital ships. Fast, maneuverable, no shields from what we can tell. But they make up for it in numbers. We're tracking over 2,000 of them. Each Star Destroyer appears to carry around 72. Tony pulled up a separate image. But here's the real problem, this thing. The Death Star filled the display, its surface covered in trenches and weapon emplacements. A massive concave dish dominated one hemisphere. "That's the planet, killer," Bruce said quietly, adjusting his glasses. The energy readings Jarvis pulled, it's not theoretical. Oh, that weapon is functional. "How functional?" Steve asked. Tony's expression was grim. "One shot, Steve. One shot and Earth becomes an asteroid field. The energy required to overcome planetary gravitational binding energy is astronomical, and this thing has it." They weren't bluffing. A crack of thunder announced Thor's arrival before the Bifrost's light faded from Stark Tower's landing pad. The God of Thunder strode into the operations center, Mjolnir in hand, his face set in an expression of barely contained fury. "I have conferred with Heimdall," Thor announced without preamble. "These invaders are not from any of the 9 realms, nor from any corner of the cosmos known to Asgard. They have breached the very barriers between realities themselves." "Great interdimensional conquerors," Clint muttered, "because regular aliens weren't enough." "Can Asgard help?" Steve asked directly. Thor's expression darkened. "My father watches. He has declared this a test for Midgard, to prove itself worthy of standing among the realms as an independent power. He will not intervene unless Earth's destruction becomes imminent." "Typical Odin," Tony said dryly. "Nothing says cosmic wisdom like letting your son's friends fight a space empire alone. I stand with you regardless of my father's decree," Thor said firmly, slamming Mjolnir on the table with enough force to crack the reinforced surface. "These invaders threaten my friends, my adopted home. They will learn that Earth's defenders are not so easily cowed." The door opened and Nick Fury walked in, his expression even more severe than usual. Behind him came Agent Hill carrying a data pad. "Mace, we've got a situation. The Empire's not waiting for their deadline." Tony pulled up new satellite footage. A single Imperial Star Destroyer had broken formation and was descending into Earth's atmosphere over the Atlantic Ocean. "SHIELD wants to attempt first contact," Fury said. "See if we can negotiate with someone other than that wrinkled fascist who thinks he can threaten Earth." "First contact with who?" Natasha asked. As if in answer, the satellite feed showed a massive shuttle launching from the descending Star Destroyer, black, angular, and flanked by TIE fighters. It was heading toward New York City. "They're coming to us," Steve realized. "Landing zone appears to be Central Park," Hill reported. "SHIELD has units mobilizing, but Director Fury wants the Avengers on site." "It's a trap," Bruce said immediately. "Or it has to be." "Maybe," Steve agreed. "But it's also an opportunity to take their measure. See who we're really dealing with before the shooting starts." He turned to the team. "We go in ready for anything, but we try diplomacy first. If these people can be reasoned with..." "They opened with a threat to destroy the planet, Cap," Tony interrupted. "Not exactly the diplomatic type." Which is why we bring enough force to make them think twice about starting something they can't finish, Steve countered. He looked at Thor. Can you get Sif and the Warriors 3 here? They will come if I call, despite Odin's orders. Thor's grip on Mjolnir tightened. They too have grown fond of this realm. Do it. Natasha, Clint, get into position on the rooftops. Tony, you and I go to the meeting. Bruce. I'll be nearby, Bruce said. Skyrim, if things go wrong, they'll know it. Within 30 minutes, Central Park had been evacuated. S.H.I.E.L.D. established a perimeter while news helicopters circled at a mandated distance, broadcasting the event to a world watching with held breath. The Imperial shuttle descended through the atmosphere, its black hull reflecting the afternoon sun like polished obsidian. Tony landed in his Iron Man armor beside Steve, repulsors charged and ready. You know, I'm getting real tired of aliens landing in New York. We should start charging them. Stay focused, Steve said, shield ready on his arm. The shuttle touched down with barely a whisper of repulsor thrust, far more advanced than any Earth-based landing technology. The boarding ramp lowered with a pneumatic hiss, releasing a cloud of vapor into the cool air. First came the Stormtroopers, 20 of them in formation, white armor gleaming, E-11 blaster rifles held at ready positions. They moved with military precision, establishing a perimeter around the shuttle with practiced efficiency. Their helmets turned in unison to scan the area, T-visors inscrutable and impersonal. Then he emerged. Darth Vader descended the ramp like a walking nightmare. 7 feet of black armor and flowing cape, his mechanical breathing echoing across the park with a rhythm that sounded like death's own heartbeat. The Force surrounded him like an invisible storm, and even those without mystical sensitivity could feel the weight of his presence. Heavy, dark, suffocating. Tony's sensors immediately lit up with warnings. Cap, I'm reading something weird. Energy field around him, but it's not electromagnetic. It's not radiation. I don't know what it is. Steve felt it too. A pressure against his chest, a coldness that had nothing to do with temperature. Every instinct honed through decades of combat told him the figure in black armor was dangerous beyond measure. Vader stopped 10 meters from the Avengers. When he spoke, his voice resonated through his respirator with mechanical precision. I am Lord Vader, Supreme Commander of the Imperial Forces and servant of Emperor Palpatine. I speak with the Emperor's authority. Captain Steve Rogers, Steve replied, keeping his voice steady and firm. I speak for Earth's defenders. We received your Emperor's message. Then you understand the choice before you. Vader's mask turned slightly to regard Tony. Surrender or be annihilated. See, that's where you've made a mistake, Tony said, his faceplate sliding up to reveal his face. Earth doesn't do ultimatums. We've been invaded before, by aliens, by robots, by gods with inferiority complexes. They all had the same message. Bow down or die. Want to guess how that worked out for them? Your previous conflicts are irrelevant, Vader stated. The Empire has conquered 1,000 worlds. We have crushed rebellions that fielded fleets numbering in the thousands. Your primitive planet possesses no unified government, no orbital defenses, no ships of war. You have already lost. The only question is how many of your people die before you accept this truth. Lightning crackled across the sky as Thor landed between Vader and the Avengers, Mjolnir crackling with barely contained power. Bold words from one who skulks behind masks and machines. I am Thor, son of Odin, Prince of Asgard and protector of Midgard. Your Emperor threatens my friends, Invader. Perhaps you should consider that before making threats you cannot fulfill. For the first time, Vader's attention focused entirely on Thor. There was a pause, long enough that the Stormtroopers shifted slightly, fingers moving closer to triggers. You? Vader's respirator breathing quickened slightly. You are strong in the Force. Untrained, raw, but powerful. His gloved hand moved to the cylindrical device at his belt. Are you this world's champion? I am one of many, Thor replied, lightning dancing between his fingers. And I say again, you will not take this world. Vader's hand closed around his lightsaber hilt, but didn't activate it yet. The Emperor sensed unusual power emanating from this planet. So you are what drew his interest. His mask tilted slightly. Tell me, Prince of Asgard, can you withstand the Death Star's super laser? We're not here to compare weapons, Steve interjected, stepping forward despite every instinct screaming at him to keep distance from the dark figure. You've made your threat clear. Now hear ours. Leave. Turn your ships around and go back to wherever you came from. Earth is under the protection of powers you clearly don't understand. Powers? Vader's respirator laugh was a mechanical rasp. I have faced Jedi Masters with centuries of training. I have killed creatures that could shatter mountains with their minds. The Emperor himself commands the dark side of the Force with power that could tear fleets from the sky. His breathing steadied. What powers does this backward world possess that could threaten the might of the Galactic Empire? As if in answer, a sudden wind whipped through Central Park despite the clear sky. Reality itself seemed to ripple as a circular portal of golden sparks materialized beside the Avengers. Through it stepped the Ancient One. Her yellow robes pristine, her expression serene, but her eyes holding the weight of centuries. You speak of forces you understand, she said calmly. Allow me to demonstrate forces you do not. With a gesture, the Ancient One created a mandala of golden light in the air, intricate patterns of mystical energy that bore no relation to anything in the Empire's vast database of Force techniques. The very air around her bent, showing reflections of other dimensions, other realities, possibilities folding into and out of existence. Vader's hand immediately went to his lightsaber, activating it. The crimson blade hummed to life, casting red light across his black armor. Sorcery, he stated, his mechanical voice carrying a note of interest. The Force takes many forms. This is not your Force, the Ancient One replied. I am the Sorcerer Supreme, guardian of this reality against threats from beyond. And you, Lord Vader, are very much a threat from beyond. The Stormtroopers raised their blasters, training them on the new arrival. The tension in Central Park ratcheted up to a breaking point. One wrong move, one hasty trigger pull, and the first shots of a war would be fired. Steve raised his hand. Stand down, everyone. He looked at Vader. We came here to talk, so let's talk. What does the Empire want? Compliance, Vader said simply, his lightsaber still ignited. Order. Your world is divided into squabbling nations, wasting resources on internal conflicts while possessing technology and power that should be unified under Imperial authority. The Emperor offers peace through strength, prosperity through submission. We've heard that before, Steve said. From fascists, from tyrants, from madmen who thought they knew better than the people they sought to enslave. The answer is the same now as it was then. No. Vader's breathing filled the silence that followed. Then, with deliberate slowness, he raised his left hand. The Force surged. Steve felt himself lifted off the ground, an invisible hand closing around his throat. His shield clattered to the grass as he clawed at his neck, unable to draw breath. "Steve!" Tony's repulsors fired immediately, twin beams of concentrated energy lancing toward Vader. The Sith Lord's right hand moved in a casual gesture. The repulsor beams bent in midair, redirected harmlessly into the sky. With another thought, Tony was ripped backward, crashing into a tree with enough force to dent his armor. Thor roared and hurled Mjolnir with all his godly strength. The hammer flew like a thunderbolt, trailing lightning. Vader's lightsaber came up in a perfect defensive arc. When Mjolnir struck the crimson blade, the impact created a shockwave that shattered every window within 100 meters. The hammer rebounded, returning to Thor's hand, but Vader hadn't moved an inch. The Stormtroopers opened fire. Blaster bolts, superheated plasma, streaked toward the Avengers. Steve hit the ground gasping as Vader released him, his shield instantly up to deflect the incoming fire. The bolts struck the vibranium and ricocheted harmlessly. But the sheer volume of fire forced him into defensive positions. The Ancient One created a shield of golden energy, absorbing dozens of blaster bolts before gesturing sharply. The ground beneath half the Stormtroopers erupted, earth and grass transforming into grasping tendrils that wrapped around white armor and pulled soldiers down. From the rooftops, Natasha and Clint opened fire, bullets and arrows striking with precision at exposed joints in Stormtrooper armor. 3 soldiers went down, but more were already taking their positions, their training evident in their coordinated fire patterns. "So much for diplomacy," Tony said, the repulsors charging as he blasted 2 Stormtroopers backward. "Jarvis, call in the Hulk. We need the big guy." Vader advanced on Thor, lightsaber humming. "You have power, Asgardian. Let us see if you can withstand a Sith Lord." Thor spun Mjolnir and called down lightning from the clear sky. Massive bolts that would have incinerated a normal being. Vader raised his hand, and the lightning stopped, held in the air by the Force, crackling and sparking but unable to strike its target. "Impressive," Vader acknowledged, "but insufficient." With a thrust of his hand, he hurled the captured lightning back at Thor. The God of Thunder took his own lightning full in the chest and was blasted backward, crashing through the Imperial shuttle's boarding ramp. "Enough!" The Ancient One's voice carried power that resonated across dimensions. She created a massive mandala beneath the entire battlefield and twisted. Reality inverted. Suddenly, the Avengers and the Imperial forces stood on a mirror dimensions version of Central Park. Identical in every way, except the sky now showed fractal patterns of impossible geometry. "We will finish this without destroying the city," the Ancient One said calmly. Vader looked around at the altered reality, then back at the sorceress. "You command powers outside the Force? Intriguing." His lightsaber came up into a classic Sith combat stance. But power alone does not guarantee victory. He moved, faster than any normal being had right to. Vader closed the distance to the Ancient One in a Force-enhanced sprint. His lightsaber came down in a strike that would have bisected her, only to meet a blade of pure golden energy that the Ancient One conjured from nothing. The weapons clashed, light against light, and the shockwave sent Stormtroopers tumbling backward. In the chaos of battle, as gods and sorcerers and super soldiers fought against an empire from another reality entirely, one thing became absolutely clear to everyone present. This was just the beginning. And when the Emperor learned that Earth's defenders had rejected his ultimatum, not with words, but with violence, the real invasion would begin. Above Earth's atmosphere, aboard the Death Star, Emperor Palpatine watched the battle through Vader's helmet feed. He saw the lightning wielder, the sorceress who bent reality, the armored warrior whose shield seemed indestructible. And he smiled. So the primitive world has teeth after all, he murmured. How delightful. He reached out through the Force across the vast distance to his apprentice. Lord Vader, withdraw. We have learned what we needed to know. In the mirror dimension, Vader disengaged from combat, his lightsaber deactivating. The Emperor has spoken. You have 72 hours. Use them to prepare your defenses. His respirator breathing seemed to carry dark amusement. They will not be sufficient. A portal opened, not mystical, but technological, and the remaining stormtroopers retreated through it in disciplined formation. Vader was the last to leave, his masked gaze sweeping across the assembled heroes. We will meet again, he promised. Then he was gone. The Ancient One released the mirror dimension, returning them to normal reality. The park was scorched, the trees toppled, but no civilians had been harmed. Steve picked up his shield, his throat still aching from Vader's force choke. That could have gone better. He was testing us, the Ancient One said quietly, measuring our capabilities, learning our strengths. Did we pass? Tony asked, his armor showing scorch marks from blaster fire. Thor stood, Mjolnir crackling with frustrated lightning. We survived. But that warrior in black, he is no mere soldier. His power is considerable. And he's not even the biggest threat. Bruce's voice came over their comms. He'd watched the entire battle from a safe distance, forcing the Hulk down despite every instinct screaming to smash. That Emperor, he's the one we need to worry about. Steve looked up at the sky, where the Imperial fleet hung like a sword of Damocles over Earth. And then we have 72 hours to figure out how to fight an empire. Get everyone, to Stark Tower. It's time Earth's defenders became an army. The first battle was over. The first blood had been drawn. And high above, the Death Star's superlaser began charging with a low, ominous hum that would take exactly 72 hours to reach full power. The emergency summit convened 18 hours after the failed diplomatic contact. Stark Tower's conference room had been hastily expanded to accommodate what might have been the largest gathering of Earth's defenders in history. At the main table sat the core Avengers: Steve Rogers, Tony Stark, Thor, Natasha Romanoff, Clint Barton, and Bruce Banner. But they were far from alone. King T'Challa of Wakanda had arrived via royal transport, his sister Shuri beside him with tablets displaying vibranium technology schematics. The Ancient One stood near the window, her hands folded calmly despite the gravity of the situation. Wong, her most trusted sorcerer, stood at attention beside her. Nick Fury occupied one end of the table, representing what remained of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s command structure. Agent Hill worked frantically at a holographic display, coordinating global military responses. And standing somewhat apart from the others, having arrived via Bifrost despite Odin's explicit orders, were Lady Sif and the Warriors Three, Fandral, Hogun, and Volstagg. Their presence was Asgard's unofficial support, warriors choosing loyalty to Thor over obedience to the Allfather. Let's start with what we know, Steve began, standing at the head of the table like the strategic commander he'd been since World War II. Tony? Stark manipulated the holographic display, bringing up detailed scans of the Imperial fleet. Jarvis has been working overtime, analyzing every scrap of data from our little meet and greet with Lord Vader and his merry band of fascists. Yet here's what we've learned. Their ships are built around something called turbo-laser technology, essentially plasma weapons that superheat matter and turn it into bolts of energy. Each Star Destroyer carries hundreds of these weapons. He zoomed in on a TIE fighter. Their fighters are fast, faster than anything we've got except maybe the Quinjet, and they're swarming us. Over 2,000 confirmed, and that's just what we can see. But they're also fragile. No shields, limited armor, one good hit and there's space debris. That's the good news, Shuri interjected, her accent carrying the confidence of Wakanda's greatest mind. The bad news is, their capital ships are another matter entirely. We've analyzed the energy signatures from their shield systems. Brother, do you remember the Jabari's ceremonial shields? T'Challa nodded. Vibranium weave, capable of absorbing kinetic impacts. These shields work on a similar principle, but with energy. They create a barrier that can absorb directed energy weapons, kinetic projectiles, even nuclear warheads based on our calculations. Shuri pulled up new data. However, Wakandan sonic technology operates on different principles. Our weapons might penetrate where conventional arms cannot. Might. Fury's single eye fixed on her. Science is not about certainties, Director Fury. It's about calculated probabilities. Shuri's fingers danced across her tablet. But yes, I believe Wakanda's technology gives us an advantage they won't expect. What about their leader? Natasha asked. This Vader. What the hell was that power he used? The Ancient One stepped forward. He calls it the Force. It is similar to the mystic arts in function, but fundamentally different in nature. She gestured, creating a small mandala of golden light in the air. The mystic arts draw power from other dimensions, channeling energy through precise gestures and mental discipline. Vader's power appears to be an internal energy field that responds to will and emotion. You held your own against him, Wong observed. For a moment, the Ancient One corrected. But I sensed something during our brief clash. His power is fueled by darkness, by anger and hatred. And it is vast. He has decades of training, perhaps more. If we face him again, it will not be an easy victory. Then we don't face him alone, Thor declared, slamming his fist on the table. Sif, you fought alongside me against the Dark Elves. How would you counsel we engage such a foe? Lady Sif considered carefully. On Svartalfheim, we faced an enemy that could manipulate reality itself. We won through coordination. No single warrior, not even you, Prince Thor, could stand alone. This Vader wields formidable power, but he is still one being. Overwhelm him with numbers, with tactics, with warriors who know how to fight as one. That's assuming we can get close enough to him to matter, Clint pointed out. They've got 37 capital ships, over 2,000 fighters, and tens of thousands of troops. We're looking at an invasion force that could glass the entire planet before we scratch their paint. Which brings us to the elephant in the room, Tony said grimly, pulling up an image of the Death Star. This thing. Jarvis has been running calculations since it appeared, and the numbers are not encouraging. Bruce Banner leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. Tony asked me to verify his math. I wish I could tell you he was wrong. He pulled up additional data. The Death Star's superlaser operates on principles that shouldn't be possible. It's generating enough energy to overcome the gravitational binding energy of an entire planet. We're talking about power output in the range of 2.4 times 10 to the power of 32 joules. In English, Bruce, Steve requested. It means they can destroy Earth with one shot, Bruce said quietly. And based on energy readings Tony's satellites detected, that weapon is charging, slowly but steadily. At current rates, it'll reach full power in approximately 70 hours. The room fell silent. The weight of that statement pressed down on everyone present. No, can we destroy it? T'Challa asked directly. Tony brought up tactical projections. It's 160 kilometers in diameter. The trench network alone covers thousands of square kilometers. Jarvis identified what might be a thermal exhaust port, a small opening that leads directly to the station's reactor. But it's ray-shielded, it's heavily defended, and it's only 2 meters wide. The old Death Star had a similar weakness, Steve said. If we can get a strike team inside? That's a big if, Cap, Tony interrupted. We'd need to get through their fighter screen, penetrate their shields, fly through a defended trench system while TIE fighters are trying to blast us into atoms, and make a shot that's harder than threading a needle from a mile away, while moving at high speed, under fire. I've made harder shots, Clint said dryly. Not from inside a spacecraft moving at several hundred meters per second, you haven't. Then perhaps the Death Star is not our first concern, T'Challa suggested. If we can eliminate their fleet, force them to withdraw, the station becomes less of a threat. Eliminate their fleet? Fury shook his head. Your Majesty, with all respect, we don't have a fleet. Earth's orbital capabilities amount to the International Space Station and maybe a dozen military satellites. We're not fighting this war in space. Then we bring them to us, Steve said, his strategic mind working. Draw them down to Earth, into an environment where our advantages matter more than theirs. Their ships can bombard us from orbit, Hogan pointed out, his usually quiet voice carrying certainty. They need not land to destroy cities. Unless they want something, Natasha said slowly, her spy's instincts picking up on something. Vader was testing us, yes, but he was also studying us, looking for something specific. The Ancient One nodded. I sensed it as well. The Dark One and his master, they're searching for power. Something on Earth has drawn their attention beyond simple conquest. The Infinity Stones, Bruce realized. If they somehow detected cosmic energy signatures. The Tesseract is in Asgard's vault, Thor confirmed. The ether was given to the Collector after the Dark Elves' defeat. But the Time Stone. He looked at the Ancient One. She touched the eye of Agamotto hanging at her neck. Is here, and if they seek it, they will have to come to Earth to claim it. Then we use that, Steve said, his tactical mind assembling a strategy. We make them commit to a ground assault, use the stones as bait, draw their forces down where our heroes can engage them directly. That's suicide, Fury stated flatly. You're talking about fighting tens of thousands of soldiers equipped with energy weapons we can barely counter. We fought the Chitauri, Steve countered. We won. The Chitauri were cannon fodder controlled by Loki, Fury shot back. These are trained soldiers of a galactic empire. From what we saw in Central Park, they're disciplined, well-equipped, and they don't break formation even under fire. Then we need an army of our own, Tony said. Fortunately, I've been working on something. He pulled up new schematics. After Ultron, I started developing the Iron Legion. Not killer robots this time, but defensive drones, and remote-operated suits programmed for crowd control and disaster response. I've got about 50 ready to deploy, and I can have another 100 operational in 48 hours. 50 robots against an empire, Volstagg rumbled. Forgive me if I'm not inspired, Man of Iron. It's 50 robots more than we had yesterday, Tony shot back. And with Shuri's help, maybe we can integrate Wakandan tech to give them an edge against Imperial shields. Shuri was already pulling up designs. If we can modify your arc reactor technology with vibranium enhancement, yes, I can see the potential. Brother? T'Challa stood, his decision made. Wakanda will stand with Earth. Our warriors, our technology, our resources, all are at your disposal. If this empire believes our world defenseless, we will teach them the folly of underestimating us. The Black Order fell when Wakanda opened its doors, Steve said with genuine gratitude. Thank you. What of Asgard's might? Fandral asked, his usual swagger subdued by the gravity of the situation. Thor, surely your father, will not act, Thor said bitterly. He watches from his throne while my friends face annihilation. But I am here, and with me stand the finest warriors Asgard has ever produced. He looked at his companions. We few may not turn the tide alone, but we will fight until our last breath. Poetic and depressing, Tony muttered. Anyone else got good news? I may, the Ancient One said. The mystic arts can affect their technology in ways they cannot predict. We can create portals for rapid troop deployment, shields against their energy weapons. Chimov entrap their fighters in mirror dimensions where they cannot harm civilians. The masters of the mystic arts will join this battle. So we have magic, Asgardians, super soldiers, Wakandan tech, and whatever the big guy brings to the table. Tony summarized, nodding toward Bruce. That's actually not terrible. It's not enough, Bruce said quietly. I've run the numbers. Even with all of that, we're outnumbered and outgunned. If they commit their full forces, if that Death Star fires, then we make sure it doesn't, Steve said firmly. We need to divide our efforts. One team focuses on taking down the Death Star. Another coordinates ground defense. A third targets their command ship, take out their leadership, and maybe the rest falls apart. 3 suicide missions instead of 1, Clint observed. I like it. It's efficient. Who leads what? Natasha asked the practical question. Steve looked around the table. Tony, you're our best pilot, and you've got the tech expertise. You take the Death Star assault. Build a team who can fly and shoot in space. Rocket science, literally. Tony's faceplate slid down. I'll take Rhodey if he's available, maybe the Falcon. We'll need the Quinjet modified for space combat. I can have that ready in 24 hours, Shuri confirmed. T'Challa, you coordinate ground defense, Steve continued. Wakandan warriors, shield forces, anyone who can hold a weapon. You're the king. People will follow you. T'Challa nodded gravely. Wakanda will be the shield. Their armies will break upon our spears. Thor, you're with me, Steve said. We're going after their command ship. Vader, the Emperor, whoever's calling the shots. We cut off the head. A worthy battle, Thor said with grim satisfaction. I will face this Vader again, and this time I shall not hold back. Ancient One, Steve turned to the sorceress. Your people can be everywhere at once with those portals. Coordinate with all teams. Get our people where they need to be, when they need to be there. The Masters of Kamartaj stand ready, she confirmed. Bruce, Steve looked at his friend. I need you with T'Challa. If things go south, the Hulk will be there, Bruce said, though his expression showed how much he hated the necessity. I can't promise control, but I can promise destruction. That's all we need. Fury leaned back in his chair. You're asking for a coordinated planetary defense against an interdimensional empire in less than 3 days, and you know that's impossible, right? We've done impossible before, Steve said. We'll do it again. Captain Rogers. A new voice spoke from the doorway. Everyone turned to see a holographic projection materializing. But this one wasn't from S.H.I.E.L.D. technology. The image was of a human male, middle-aged, wearing S.H.I.E.L.D. insignia but with eyes that seemed oddly knowing. I am Agent Philip Coulson, the figure said. Or rather, I was. I've been away. But I'm back, and I'm bringing resources you're going to need. The image shifted to show what appeared to be a massive aircraft carrier. The playground has been monitoring the situation. We have inhuman assets, enhanced individuals, and a few tricks even S.H.I.E.L.D. doesn't know about. Consider us your reserves. Fury's eye narrowed. Coulson, thought you were dead. Got better. Long story. The hologram smiled slightly. Point is, Earth's got more heroes than you think. I'm reaching out to everyone, enhanced individuals, vigilantes, anyone who's ever put on a mask and decided to make a difference. This isn't just an Avengers fight. This is everyone's fight. Then let's make it count, Steve said. He looked around the table at Earth's defenders, heroes, warriors, kings, sorcerers, and spies. We have 3 days to prepare for the biggest battle Earth has ever faced. 3 days to build an army, fortify our defenses, and figure out how to destroy a weapon that can crack planets. He picked up his shield. So, let's get to work. The meeting dissolved into focused chaos as teams split off to their assignments. Tony and Shuri immediately began collaborating on technical solutions. T'Challa contacted Wakanda to mobilize their armies. The Ancient One opened portals to begin gathering sorcerers from around the world. And in the quiet moment as the room cleared, Thor and Steve stood together, looking out at the sky. Do you think we can win this? Thor asked quietly. Steve was silent for a moment. I think we have to try, because if we don't, there won't be an Earth left to save. Then we shall try together, friend. Thor clasped Steve's shoulder. And if we fall fighting. There is honor in that. I'd rather we fall winning, Steve said with a slight smile. Much better for morale. Far above, aboard the Super Star Destroyer Executor, Darth Vader stood before a holographic projection of Emperor Palpatine. Your report, Lord Vader? The planet's defenders are more formidable than anticipated, my master. One, they possess powers outside the Force. Energy manipulation, reality alteration, physical strength that rivals the ancient Sith. The one called Thor commands lightning itself. And yet, they are primitives, Palpatine said, his yellow eyes gleaming. Scattered, disorganized, lacking unified command. They will resist beautifully and fall inevitably. He leaned forward. Continue your preparations. When the 72 hours expire, I want overwhelming force. Crush their capitals, shatter their armies, and when they are broken, I will descend to claim whatever power drew us to this insignificant world. And if they somehow damage the Death Star? Palpatine's smile was a cruel thing. Then you will demonstrate why the Empire's might does not rest on one weapon alone, my apprentice. And you will show them what it means to face a Sith Lord unbound by mercy. Yes, my master. The hologram faded. Vader turned to the viewport, watching the small blue planet below. He could feel it through the Force. Fear, determination, desperate hope. They were preparing for war. Good. The dark side thrived on conflict. And soon, there would be conflict enough to reshape this entire reality. The countdown continued. 54 hours remained. 48 hours until the deadline. The world held its breath. New York City had become a fortress. Stark Tower served as the nerve center, but the real preparations sprawled across the entire metropolitan area. Buildings were evacuated, civilians transported to underground shelters designed after the Chitauri invasion, deeper this time, reinforced with Wakandan vibranium composite that T'Challa had shipped in via massive cargo transports that landed in Central Park every 6 hours. Tony Stark hadn't slept in 2 days. He stood in his workshop, surrounded by a dozen holographic displays showing simultaneous engineering problems. The Mark 50 armor, his latest design, hung partially assembled beside him, while Jarvis coordinated the construction of 150 Iron Legion drones across automated factories in 3 countries. Sir, the vibranium integration is causing harmonic resonance issues with the arc reactor, Jarvis reported. At current output levels, the drones will overload after approximately 14 minutes of sustained combat. Then we don't sustain combat for 15 minutes, Tony muttered, manipulating the hologram to show power distribution patterns. Shuri, you seeing this? On a video feed, Shuri worked in a converted hangar at a military base in New Jersey, Wakandan technology interfacing with Stark Industries systems in ways that should have been impossible. The problem is, your reactors are designed for continuous output. Wakandan weapons work on burst principles: charge, release, recharge. We need to reprogram your entire power management system. In 48 hours. 36. Shuri corrected. We need 12 hours for testing unless you want your drones exploding mid-battle. Point taken. Tony pulled up new code, his fingers flying across haptic keyboards. What about the Quinjet modifications? The repulsor engines will function in vacuum, and I've added Wakandan shield generators. You'll have maybe 30 seconds of protection against concentrated turbolaser fire. Shuri's expression was serious. Tony, this mission, the Death Star assault, the odds are not favorable. Story of my life, Princess? Tony didn't look up from his work. Just make sure I can fly straight and shoot straight. I'll handle the rest. You're going to die up there. Tony's hands paused. Maybe. But if I don't try, 7 billion people die down here. Simple math. Across the river in New Jersey, Adarodi, Colonel James Rhodes, stood in his war machine armor, running systems checks while technicians swarmed around him making modifications. Sam Wilson, the Falcon, tested his new wing pack nearby, the original wings replaced with a Wakandan design that could function in space. Talk to me, Jarvis, Rhodey said. What am I working with? The Wakandan modifications have increased your armor's durability by 40% and added limited energy shielding, Jarvis responded through the armor's comm system. However, your ammunition stores remain limited. You have approximately 600 rounds for the shoulder-mounted minigun and 48 micro-missiles. Once depleted, you'll be limited to repulsor attacks. 600 rounds against an army. Rhodey shook his head. Must we're going to need a miracle. We're going to need about 50 miracles, Sam called over. And that's just to reach the Death Star. After that, we'll need 50 more to actually blow it up. One miracle at a time, Sam. In Wakanda, T'Challa stood before his assembled forces. 5,000 Dora Milaje warriors, Wakanda's finest, stood at attention in perfect formation. Behind them, the armies of the Jabari tribe, the Border tribe, the Mining tribe, and the Merchant tribe assembled with traditional weapons enhanced by vibranium technology, spears that could fire energy pulses, shields that could absorb and redirect force, armor that could turn aside bullets and blades alike. Okoye, general of the Dora Milaje, stood beside her king. The transports are ready, and we can have the first wave in New York within the hour. And the shield generators? Positioned around the city's perimeter. If they try orbital bombardment, we can protect the core of the city for approximately 10 minutes before the generators overload. 10 minutes. T'Challa's jaw tightened. Not nearly enough if the Death Star targets us directly. Then we must ensure the Death Star is destroyed before it can fire. T'Challa looked at his general, his friend. Okoye, I am asking our people to fight a war on foreign soil against an enemy from another reality. If we fail, there will be no Wakanda to return to. Okoye interrupted gently. My king, for centuries we hid behind our barriers while the world suffered. Now the world needs us. Sir, and we are finally answering that call. She placed her spear against her shoulder in salute. Wakanda forever. Wakanda forever, T'Challa repeated, the weight of his nation's future heavy on his shoulders. In Kamartaj, the Ancient One stood in the center of the courtyard as 50 masters of the mystic arts assembled in concentric circles around her. Wong coordinated the positioning, ensuring each sorcerer understood their role in the coming battle. When the Empire attacks, the Ancient One said, her voice carrying to every corner of the courtyard, they will expect conventional warfare. Guns, explosions, chaos. We will give them something they cannot predict. She gestured, and the air filled with golden mandalas, hundreds of them, showing different locations across New York City. Portal warfare. We will move our forces instantly across the battlefield. We will redirect their weapons fire. We will trap their vehicles in mirror dimensions where they cannot harm innocents. Master, one of the younger sorcerers spoke up nervously. The Dark Warrior, Vader. His power felt similar to our arts, but corrupted. How do we fight such a being? Carefully, the Ancient One replied. And together. No single sorcerer should engage him alone. If you encounter him, retreat through portals and alert the others. We will face him as we face all threats, with wisdom, patience, and overwhelming coordination. She looked at the assembled masters, these men and women who had dedicated their lives to protecting reality from mystical threats. The mystic arts have defended Earth from dimensional incursions for thousands of years. We have faced demons, dark gods, and entities that sought to corrupt our reality. This empire is formidable, yes, but they are still bound by physical laws, and physical laws can be bent by those who know how. On the Shield helicarrier, one of the few remaining functional after the Hydra purge, Nick Fury coordinated military forces from a dozen nations. The main display showed troop movements, supply lines, and defensive positions being established across New York and 3 other major cities identified as potential Imperial landing zones. General Ross is mobilizing National Guard units across the eastern seaboard, Agent Hill reported. We've got 40,000 troops ready to deploy, but sir, they're armed with conventional weapons, against Imperial armor and energy shields. They'll do what soldiers do, Fury said grimly, and they'll fight with what they have and hope it's enough. What about the enhanced individuals Coulson mentioned? Coming in from everywhere. Hill pulled up a roster. Luke Cage and Jessica Jones from New York, Quake from Coulson's team, some kid called Spider-Man who apparently stopped a robbery while the world was preparing for the apocalypse. There's even a blind vigilante from Hell's Kitchen who wants in. Take everyone who can throw a punch or take a hit, Fury ordered. We need bodies on the ground, and right now I don't care if they're wearing spandex or Kevlar. Sir, there's something else. Hill hesitated. We're picking up movement from the Imperial fleet. 3 Star Destroyers breaking formation, descending into upper atmosphere. Fury's jaw tightened. No, they're not waiting for the deadline. Should we scramble defensive forces? Not yet. Let's see what they're doing. Fury pulled up satellite imagery showing the descending Star Destroyers. If they're scouting positions or testing our responses, I want to know their tactics before we commit. The 3 Imperial Star Destroyers descended majestically through Earth's atmosphere, their shields glowing as they deflected atmospheric friction. They positioned themselves in a triangle formation, one above New York, one above London, and one above Beijing. Each ship hung there like a sword suspended over humanity's greatest cities. Then, they broadcasted. Every screen on Earth, television, computer, phone, displayed the same message. Emperor Palpatine's holographic figure appeared, his yellow eyes seeming to look directly at each viewer. "People of Earth," the Emperor began, his voice carrying the weight of dark authority. "I see you prepare for war. How? Predictable. You gather your primitive weapons, summon your costume champions, and imagine that you can resist the might of the Galactic Empire." The image shifted to show footage from inside a Star Destroyer. Vast hangars filled with TIE fighters, corridors lined with thousands of Stormtroopers, weapon batteries that stretched beyond sight. "Let me show you the futility of resistance," Palpatine continued. "Let me demonstrate what awaits those who defy the Emperor's will." The hologram changed to show a planet, not Earth, but somewhere else. Green continents, blue oceans, white clouds, beautiful and alive. Then the Death Star's super laser fired. The beam was green, coherent, impossibly powerful. It struck the planet's surface and punched through the crust, the mantle, down to the core itself. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the planet began to crack. Fissures of magma spread across the continents. Oceans boiled away in superheated steam. And then, with terrible finality, the entire world exploded. Chunks of planetary matter hurled into space. An entire civilization, its cities, its people, its history, reduced to debris in seconds. "That was Alderaan," Palpatine said as the footage returned to his face. "A peaceful world that supported rebellion against Imperial authority. I gave them a chance to surrender. They refused." His smile was cruel. "They no longer exist. And in 48 hours, if you continue your foolish preparations for war, Earth will join Alderaan in cosmic dust." The image shifted again, showing something new. Imperial landing barges descending from the Star Destroyers above the three cities. The massive ships settled onto the ground with deliberate precision. Boarding ramps lowered. "However," Palpatine continued, "I am not without mercy. I offer one final chance. These landing zones represent Imperial embassies. Any who wish to pledge loyalty to the Empire, who seek protection from the coming devastation, may approach these embassies and swear fealty. You will be spared. You will be taken aboard our ships before the Death Star fires. You will survive to serve the new order." Thousands of Stormtroopers marched out of the barges in perfect formation, establishing perimeters around each landing zone. Imperial officers set up processing stations. And then came the holograms, projected into the sky above each city, showing what appeared to be comfortable quarters, food, safety. 48 hours, Palpatine concluded. Choose wisely. The transmission ended. In Stark Tower, the Avengers watched in stunned silence. "He's trying to break us before the fighting even starts," Natasha said quietly. "Make people lose hope, turn against each other. Classic demoralization tactic." "It's working," Clint observed, pulling up news feeds showing crowds beginning to gather near the Imperial landing zones in all three cities. People are scared. They're thinking about those embassies. "Can you blame them?" Bruce asked. "He just showed them a planet exploding. Millions of people gone in seconds. He's offering them survival." "He's offering them slavery," Steve corrected sharply. "That's what this is. Surrender or die. And anyone who gets on those ships will spend the rest of their lives under Imperial control." "Some people will take that deal," Tony said. "When the alternative is planetary annihilation, slavery starts looking pretty good." Thor slammed Mjolnir on the table. "This Emperor is a coward. He hides behind his moon of destruction and offers false mercy to the weak. If he had honor, he would face us warrior to warrior. He has honor, the Ancient One said quietly, studying the recording of Palpatine's transmission. The honor of a predator that has perfected its hunting technique over decades. Watch his eyes. He enjoys this. The fear, the desperation, the impossible choice. He feeds on it. Then we don't give him the satisfaction? Steve decided. We keep preparing. We shore up defenses. And we make sure everyone knows that getting on those ships isn't salvation. It's surrender. And if people do it anyway? Fury asked over the comm line. Steve was quiet for a moment. Then we respect their choice, but we keep fighting for everyone who refuses to bow. T'Challa's face appeared on one of the screens. Captain, we have a situation in New York. The crowd at the Imperial landing zone is growing. Thousands of people, maybe more. Some of our officers are asking if they should disperse the crowd. No, Steve said firmly. People have the right to make their own choices, even terrible ones. But make sure our people are visible nearby. Let them see that Earth's defenders aren't running. Maybe that'll give some of them the courage to stay. Over the next 6 hours, the crowd swelled. In New York, where nearly 10,000 people gathered near the Imperial landing zone in Brooklyn, Stormtroopers stood at attention while Imperial officers processed the first arrivals, taking names, DNA samples, assigning quarters aboard the Star Destroyer. But something else was happening too. For every person who joined the line to board Imperial ships, 3 more gathered in Times Square, in Central Park, in the streets, holding signs and chanting. Earth fights back. No surrender. We are Avengers. Spontaneous demonstrations erupted in cities across the globe. Not organized by any government or hero team, but by ordinary people who looked at the Empire's ultimatum and decided they'd rather die free than live as slaves. In Hell's Kitchen, a blind lawyer named Matt Murdock stood on a rooftop, listening to the city's heartbeat. He heard fear, yes, but he also heard determination, defiance. New York had been knocked down before, by terrorists, by aliens, by its own worst impulses, and it always got back up. They picked the wrong planet, he murmured to himself. In Harlem, Luke Cage walked through his neighborhood, bulletproof skin hidden beneath a simple hoodie. People recognized him, the local hero who'd protected their streets. They stopped him, asked him what to do. We fight, he told them simply, because that's what we do. That's what New York does. In Queens, Peter Parker, still just 17 years old, sat in his room at Aunt May's house, watching the news coverage. His spider sense had been screaming since the Imperial fleet arrived. Every instinct told him to run, to hide, to protect Aunt May by staying out of this fight. But he remembered what Tony had told him after he'd helped stop the Vulture. If you're nothing without the suit, you shouldn't have it. This wasn't about the suit. This was about standing up when standing up mattered most. He pulled out his web shooters and started checking the fluid levels. Aboard the Super Star Destroyer Executor, Darth Vader watched the multiple screens showing crowds gathering, some to surrender, some to resist. He felt the currents of the Force swirling around the planet, patterns of fear and courage intermixing in ways that made the outcome uncertain. My lord, an Imperial officer approached cautiously. The processing is proceeding as planned. We estimate we'll have 10,000 defectors aboard our ships within 12 hours. 10,000, Vader repeated. Out of 7 billion, insignificant. Yes, my lord, but every defector weakens their resolve. No. Vader turned to face the officer, and even through his mask, the officer felt the weight of disapproval. Every person who refuses to board our ships strengthens their resolve. Look at them." He gestured to the screens showing the demonstrations. "They are not breaking. They are unifying." The officer swallowed nervously. "Should we accelerate the timetable? Strike before they're fully prepared?" Vader considered this. Through the Force, he could feel the key players. The Thunder God who commanded lightning, the sorceress who bent reality, the soldier with the indomitable will. They were preparing something. Multiple plans, coordinated attacks. "No," he decided finally. "The Emperor wishes them to understand the futility of resistance. Let them prepare. Let them marshal their forces and plan their desperate strategies." His respirator breathing echoed in the command center. "When we crush them at their strongest, their surrender will be absolute." The officer bowed and retreated quickly. Vader returned to watching the planet. Somewhere down there, warriors were sharpening their weapons. Heroes were donning their armor. Ordinary people were making impossible choices about survival and freedom. It reminded him of something. A memory from long ago, before the mask, before the suit. A time when he had believed in fighting for those who couldn't fight for themselves. He crushed the memory. That man was dead. Only Vader remained, and Vader served the Empire. The countdown continued. 36 hours remained, 24 hours until the deadline. The Empire's patience was wearing thin. In the Sanctum Sanctorum, the Ancient One sat in deep meditation, the eye of Agamotto glowing softly at her chest. Around her, reality rippled and folded as she gazed across possible futures. Thousands of them, millions, each showing a different outcome of the coming battle. In one future, the Death Star fired and Earth became cosmic debris. In another, the Avengers succeeded in destroying the superweapon, but Darth Vader personally led an invasion that burned New York to ashes. In a third, Emperor Palpatine himself descended to Earth, and the raw power of the dark side overwhelmed even the combined might of Earth's defenders. But there, in a narrow thread of possibility barely visible among the catastrophic outcomes, she saw a path. Difficult, requiring perfect timing and enormous sacrifice, but possible. Her eyes snapped open. Wong stood nearby, waiting patiently. "You've seen something," he observed. "A chance," the Ancient One replied. "Nothing more. Victory is not guaranteed, but neither is defeat." She rose to her feet, the eye of Agamotto pulsing with contained power. "Gather the Masters. It's time I revealed what we're truly facing." Within the hour, the core defenders assembled in the Sanctum's main chamber. Steve Rogers, Tony Stark, Thor, T'Challa, Natasha, and Bruce Banner stood in a circle as the Ancient One gestured, creating a three-dimensional representation of the Imperial fleet in golden light. "I have used the Time Stone to examine potential futures," she began without preamble. "Of the 14,605 possible outcomes of the coming battle, we achieved victory in precisely one." The room fell silent. "One?" Tony's voice was hollow. "Out of 14 million? The Empire's power is vast," the Ancient One continued. "But more dangerous than their weapons is their leader. Emperor Palpatine is not merely a politician or military commander. He is a master of the dark side, a corruption of the Force that has consumed him completely. His power rivals that of the most dangerous entities I've encountered in my centuries of service." She gestured, and the golden light shifted to show a figure in dark robes, lightning crackling from his fingertips. "In most futures, he descends to Earth personally once our resistance proves more formidable than expected. And in those futures," she paused, "when the destruction is absolute, His power can create storms that tear cities apart, generate force lightning that kills thousands, and corrupt minds on a planetary scale. Then how do we win? Steve asked directly. The Ancient One's expression was grave. By ensuring he never comes to Earth. By making the battle so quick and decisive that he remains aboard his command ship, confident in his fleet's superiority. She expanded the display. The Death Star assault must succeed. If that weapon fires, we lose. Not just the battle, but any chance of victory. Simultaneously, we must ground their fleet, force them to commit to infantry combat, where our individual warriors' strength gives us advantage. And Vader? Thor asked, his grip tightening on Mjolnir. Must be occupied. In the single future where we achieve victory, he is engaged by our strongest warriors in sustained combat, kept away from the broader battle where his presence would turn the tide. The Ancient One looked at Thor, then at Bruce. Both of you, together. Even then, victory is not certain. Bruce removed his glasses, cleaning them nervously. You want me to let the Hulk loose on a dark space wizard? That's the plan. Part of it, the Ancient One confirmed. The Hulk's rage gives him power that grows beyond measurement. Vader's strength is formidable but finite. In prolonged combat, the advantage shifts to the Hulk. Assuming Vader doesn't use that force choke trick and shut Bruce down before he can transform, Natasha pointed out. Which is why Thor engages first, the Ancient One explained. Your Asgardian physiology makes you resistant to force manipulation. Mara, you can withstand Vader's initial assault long enough for the Hulk to enter the battle. A delaying action, Thor said, understanding. Keep the Dark Lord occupied while the others strike at the heart of their forces. Exactly. Tony studied the tactical display, his engineer's mind working through the implications. Okay, so Death Star assault team, ground forces, and Vader distraction squad. That's 3 fronts. What about their infantry? Those Stormtroopers we fought were disciplined and well-armed. 30,000 of them could level the city even without orbital support. Which is where Wakanda's forces become essential, T'Challa said. Our warriors are trained to fight technologically superior foes. During the Vibranium Wars, we defended our nation against invaders armed with advanced weapons while we wielded spears. And we won because we knew the terrain, used superior tactics, and refused to break. New York isn't Wakanda, Steve pointed out. Urban warfare in a modern city, surrounded by civilians we're trying to protect. Then we evacuate the civilians, T'Challa interrupted. Use the Ancient One's portals to transport non-combatants to safe zones. Turn New York into a battlefield where every defender knows the terrain and the invaders must advance through prepared positions. Scorched earth, Natasha said. You want to turn Manhattan into Stalingrad. If that's what victory requires, T'Challa replied without hesitation. Buildings can be rebuilt, people cannot. Steve looked at Tony. The Death Star assault, you're sure you can pull it off? Tony was quiet for a long moment. No, but I'm sure I have to try. And that exhaust port is only 2 meters wide. Jarvis calculates my odds of making that shot at approximately 3.2%. But it's not 0. And right now, not 0 is the best we've got. I'm going with you. Rhodey's voice came through the comm system. Don't argue, Tony. You taught me to fly. If anyone can help you thread that needle, it's me. And me, Sam Wilson added. 3 shots are better than 1. 3 pilots who've never flown in space combat, Tony said. Against an experienced fighter screen defending a target they know is vulnerable. The second we enter that trench, every TIE fighter in the fleet is going to be on us like flies on. We know the odds, Tony. Rhodey interrupted. We're going anyway. Tony exhaled slowly. Jarvis, what's the status on the Quinjet modifications? Space-worthy, Jarvis replied. Vibranium shield generators functional, repulsor engines capable of vacuum operation, weapon systems upgraded with Wakandan energy cells. You'll have limited protection and limited ammunition, but you'll be operational. Limited, Tony repeated. My favorite word. Right up there with experimental and probably fatal. If you're looking for volunteers for certain death missions, I'm available, Clint said, entering the chamber with his bow slung over his shoulder. Heard you need someone who can make impossible shots. The Death Star run is in space, Barton, Tony said. Unless you've got a spacesuit hidden somewhere. Got something better. Clint held up what looked like a standard arrow. Stark Tech explosive arrow with Wakandan vibranium tip. Shuri says it'll punch through ray shielding. Get me close enough to that exhaust port, and I'll put it right where it needs to go. Tony stared at him. You want to take the shot? The most important shot in human history? I want to help. Clint's expression was serious. Look, I know I'm the guy with the bow and arrow on a team with a god and a giant green rage monster. But making impossible shots is what I do. So yeah, get me in position and I'll make it count. Steve nodded slowly. Then you're on the Death Star team. Tony, Rhodey, Sam, and Clint. 4 people to destroy a moon. When you say it like that, it sounds even crazier, Sam muttered. What of the Emperor himself? Thor asked. Ancient One, you said he must not come to Earth. But if the battle turns against them, will he not intervene? He will remain aboard the Super Star Destroyer Executor, the Ancient One replied. I have seen this. His arrogance is his weakness. He believes his forces are sufficient, that personally descending would be beneath him until Earth is already broken. We must ensure he maintains that belief by striking so swiftly he has no time to react. She gestured, and the tactical display rearranged itself into a timeline. The assault must be coordinated to the minute. The Death Star team strikes first, drawing the fleet's attention skyward. While their fighters engage, ground forces hit the Imperial landing zones simultaneously. Vader will respond to the ground assault. He cannot resist the opportunity to engage powerful opponents directly. Once he's committed, Thor and the Hulk engage him in sustained combat. With Vader occupied and the fleet distracted, the Death Star team reaches the exhaust port and fires. If successful, the resulting explosion will be visible from Earth. A signal to all combatants that the Empire's ultimate weapon is destroyed. And then? Bruce asked. Then the fleet has a choice. Withdraw or commit to a ground battle they cannot win. Without the Death Star, they lose their leverage. Without Vader at full capacity, they lose their most powerful field commander. The Emperor will be forced to either retreat or reveal himself. And if he comes to Earth personally, we will face him together. A lot of ifs, Natasha observed. Welcome to warfare against an interdimensional empire, Tony said dryly. Nothing but ifs and maybes, and hope this doesn't kill us all. Steve stood, his shield on his back, his expression set with determination. Then we work with what we have. Ancient One. Your sorcerers handle civilian evacuation and portal support. T'Challa, your warriors form the defensive line. Tony, you lead the space assault. Thor, Bruce, you're on Vader. Everyone else supports where needed. He looked around at Earth's defenders, heroes, warriors, sorcerers, and soldiers. 24 hours. We've prepared as much as we can. Now we wait for them to make the first move. And if they don't, Natasha asked. If they just wait for the Death Star to charge and then fire? Then we force their hand, Steve said. We hit their landing zones first, make them commit to the ground battle. Tony? I can have the Iron Legion ready in 6 hours, Tony confirmed. 150 drones armed with repulsors and vibranium-enhanced armor. They're not as good as actual pilots, but they'll give us numbers. Wakanda's forces are already in position, T'Challa added. 5,000 warriors armed and ready. The shield generators are active. When the Empire lands, we'll be waiting. Then we move in 24 hours regardless, Steve decided. Emperor gave us a deadline. We'll give him one right back. Tomorrow at dawn, Earth goes to war. The meeting dispersed, each leader moving to finalize their preparations. But as Steve turned to leave, the Ancient One caught his arm. Captain Rogers, a word. Steve waited as the others departed. When they were alone, the Ancient One's expression softened slightly. In the future, where we achieve victory, there is a cost. There's always a cost, Steve replied. Not all of you survive, she said quietly. I cannot tell you who falls. The timeline shifts with each choice made, and revealing too much risks, creating the very outcomes I seek to avoid. But I can tell you this. The victory we win tomorrow will be paid for in blood. Heroes will fall. Some will not rise again. Steve met her gaze steadily. Then they'll fall fighting for something worth dying for. That's all any soldier can ask. You speak from experience. I went into the ice expecting to die, Steve said. Woke up 70 years later in a world I barely recognized. Every day since then has been borrowed time. If tomorrow's the day I pay that debt back, at least it'll be in a fight that matters. The Ancient One studied him for a long moment. Your resolve is admirable, Captain. I see why people follow you into impossible battles. Someone has to lead, Steve said simply. Oh, might as well be the guy who's too stubborn to know when he's beaten. He left the sanctum, emerging into the New York night. The city sprawled before him, millions of lights, millions of lives, all depending on what happened when the sun rose. In Queens, Peter Parker finished loading his web shooters and looked at the homemade suit hanging in his closet. Tomorrow, he'd put it on and try to be the hero Mr. Stark believed he could be. In Harlem, Luke Cage stood on a street corner, watching his neighborhood. Tomorrow, he'd stand between his people and an empire. In Hell's Kitchen, Matt Murdock donned the red suit of Daredevil. Tomorrow, the devil of Hell's Kitchen would face demons from the stars. Across the planet, heroes great and small, known and unknown, made their own preparations. Some prayed, some sharpened weapons, and some simply spent time with loved ones, knowing it might be their last chance. And above them all, the Imperial fleet waited with the patience of predators certain of their kill. Aboard the Executor, Darth Vader stood before the viewport, watching the planet's night side. He could feel the currents of the Force reaching a crescendo, fear and courage, despair and hope, all mixing into a storm of emotion that made the dark side sing. Lord Vader, an officer approached. The Death Star superlaser has reached 75% charge. Admiral Piet requests permission to begin final targeting solutions. Proceed, Vader replied. But prepare ground forces for immediate deployment. They will attack before the deadline expires. My lord? I can feel it through the Force, Vader explained. Their champions are preparing to strike, and they will not wait for us to dictate the terms of battle. His gloved hand tightened into a fist. They have courage. It will not save them, but they have it nonetheless. The officer bowed and departed. Vader continued his vigil, his respirator breathing steady. Somewhere on that planet, the thunder god was channeling lightning. The green monster was wrestling with rage. The soldier out of time was planning strategies, all of them preparing to face the might of the Galactic Empire, all of them doomed. But Vader had learned long ago that the doomed often fought most fiercely, and sometimes, very rarely, they won. Not this time, he told himself. This time the Empire's might would be absolute. The Force would ensure it. The countdown reached its final hours. 12 hours until dawn. 12 hours until the largest battle Earth had ever seen. 12 hours until the galaxy learned whether a single planet could stand against an empire. In Stark Tower, Steve Rogers stood alone on the balcony, his shield reflecting the city lights. Tomorrow, he'd lead Earth's defenders into a battle that would make World War II look like a skirmish. He thought about Peggy Carter, about Bucky Barnes, about everyone he'd lost over the decades, about the price of heroism. Then he thought about everyone depending on him tomorrow. Tony's sarcasm hiding genuine fear, Thor's warrior's pride masking uncertainty, Bruce's struggle with the monster inside, all the soldiers and heroes and ordinary people who'd chosen to fight rather than surrender. "We're not going to lose," he said to the empty air. "We can't afford to." In the morning, he'd find out if determination was enough. Dawn broke over New York City like a promise or a threat. The sky was clear, painted in shades of gold and crimson that seemed almost prophetic. As the sun crept above the horizon, its light caught the wedge-shaped silhouettes of 3 Imperial Star Destroyers hanging in low orbit, transforming them into dark harbingers framed against the morning sky. On rooftops across Manhattan, Wakandan warriors stood at attention in perfect formation. Their vibranium spears gleamed in the early light. Energy cells charged and ready. The Dora Milaje had taken positions at key intersections, their red armor a stark contrast against the gray concrete jungle. King T'Challa stood atop Stark Tower, his Black Panther suit absorbing the dawn light, making him nearly invisible against the shadows. "All forces report ready. My king," Okoye said through the comm, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they faced. "The shield generators are at full power. Wakanda stands ready." T'Challa looked out across the city he'd come to protect, a place so different from his nation's hidden valleys and technological spires, yet no less worth defending. "Then let us show this empire what happens when they threaten our world. Wakanda forever." "Wakanda forever," 5,000 voices echoed across the comm network. In the streets below, the Ancient One stood in Times Square, surrounded by 50 masters of the mystic arts. Their hands traced intricate patterns in the air, golden mandalas of power blooming around them like flowers of light. Portals shimmered into existence throughout the city, some leading to evacuation zones in remote areas, in others connecting defensive positions for rapid troop movement. Wong appeared through a portal beside her. "The civilians have been cleared from the combat zones. 14 million people evacuated in the last 6 hours. It's the largest mystical operation in the history of Kamartaj. And now we face the consequence of drawing such attention," the Ancient One replied, her eyes tracking something invisible to others. "I can feel him. The Emperor. His presence in the Force is like a dark star, warping everything around it. He's watching us, measuring our power. Should we be concerned? Always. But concern and paralysis are different things." She gestured, and a massive mandala appeared in the sky above Manhattan, a shield of mystical energy spanning kilometers. "Let him watch. Let him see that Earth's defenders command powers his empire has never encountered." At a hastily constructed command center in New Jersey, S.H.I.E.L.D. coordinated the military response. Nick Fury stood before a wall of screens showing troop positions, satellite feeds, and real-time intelligence from a dozen sources. Air Force reports F-22s and F-35s ready for scramble, Agent Hill reported. They know their missiles probably won't penetrate Imperial shields, but they're willing to try. Tell them to hold position until the Empire commits, Fury ordered. No point wasting ordnance on shields we can't crack. Wait for the Wakandans to knock those shields down, then hit them with everything. Sir, we're also getting reports of civilian volunteers arming themselves. People are refusing to evacuate, saying they'd rather die fighting than die running. Fury's expression was grim. Can't order civilians into battle. But if they're determined to fight, make sure someone gives them a gun and points them in the right direction. This is an all-hands situation. On a rooftop in Queens, Peter Parker adjusted his web shooters one final time. His homemade suit felt inadequate against the backdrop of an interdimensional empire, but it was what he had. Below, he could see SHIELD agents setting up defensive positions, Wakandan warriors checking their weapons, ordinary people who'd chosen to stand and fight. His phone buzzed. A text from Aunt May. "Be safe. I love you." She knew. Somehow, she'd always known he was Spider-Man, and she'd never asked him to stop. Peter typed back, "I love you too. See you when this is over." He hoped that wasn't a lie. For in the experimental hangar at the New Jersey military base, Tony Stark, Rhodey, Sam Wilson, and Clint Barton stood before the modified Quinjet. The spacecraft gleamed with Wakandan enhancements, vibranium plating on critical areas, upgraded shield generators, and repulsor engines that could function in the vacuum of space. "Gentlemen," Tony said, his faceplate sliding down as the Mark 50 armor enclosed him completely. "Before we go commit suicide by attacking a moon-sized battle station, I want to say, you're all idiots for volunteering." "Takes one to know one," Rhodey replied, his War Machine armor's weapon systems running final diagnostics. "I've made harder shots," Clint said, checking his quiver of specialized arrows for the third time. "You keep saying that, but I haven't seen proof," Sam countered, testing his Wakandan wing pack. "For guess you will today." Tony pulled up a holographic display of the Death Star, highlighting the thermal exhaust port. "Jarvis has calculated our approach vector. We'll need to enter the trench system here, follow it for approximately 40 kilometers while evading defensive fire, and deliver ordnance directly into this port. The shot has to be perfect, even a meter off, and we miss the reactor entirely." "No pressure," Sam muttered. "Actually, all the pressure," Tony corrected. "That thing fires and Earth becomes an asteroid field. So yeah, just a little pressure." "The Force is with us," Clint said with a slight smirk. "Wrong franchise, Barton." "Figured it was worth a shot." Shuri appeared via holographic projection. "The Quinjet is ready, Stark. But I want to be clear. You have maybe 10 minutes of sustained shield protection against concentrated turbo-laser fire. After that, you're flying on luck and repulsors alone." 10 minutes is 9 more than I expected," Tony said. "Thanks, Princess. Don't die up there. I still need to prove Wakandan engineering is superior to yours." "Challenge accepted. If I survive, we're having a build-off." The hologram faded. Tony looked at his team. 3 men willing to fly into certain death because someone had to. "All right, Suicide Squad." "Also wrong franchise," Rhodey interrupted. "Would you let me have my moment?" Tony opened the Quinjet's boarding ramp. "We launch in 5. Get strapped in and make peace with whatever god you believe in. Because we're about to go poke a space station the size of a moon." They boarded in silence, each man lost in his own thoughts about mortality and duty. Across town in Hell's Kitchen, Matt Murdock, the daredevil, moved through the city's rooftops with practiced ease. His enhanced senses picked up everything: the Wakandan warriors' disciplined breathing, the hum of charging energy weapons, the prayers of civilians in distant shelters, the mechanical breathing of something vast and terrible in the sky above. He'd faced the Hand, Wilson Fisk, and dozens of criminals who thought Hell's Kitchen was theirs to exploit. But this was different. This was an empire with weapons that could crack planets, soldiers by the thousands, and power beyond anything his senses could fully comprehend. He landed beside Luke Cage on a rooftop overlooking the Imperial landing zone in Brooklyn. The big man stood with arms crossed, his bulletproof skin hidden beneath a simple yellow shirt. "You should have stayed in Hell's Kitchen," Luke said without looking over. "Could say the same to you about Harlem. This is bigger than neighborhoods, Red. This is everything." Matt nodded, his enhanced hearing tracking the Stormtroopers inside the Imperial perimeter. "I can hear their heartbeats. They're human, or close enough. Not robots, not monsters, just soldiers following orders. Does that make it better or worse?" "Don't know yet," Matt admitted. "But I know they're between us and freedom. So I guess it doesn't matter." In Central Park, Thor and Bruce Banner stood apart from the others, preparing for the confrontation that would determine the battle's outcome. Thor spun Mjolnir in his hand, lightning crackling around him in response to his agitation. Bruce looked uncomfortable in reinforced shield tactical gear, his eyes occasionally flickering green. "You don't have to do this," Thor said quietly. "Facing Vader, it will be dangerous even for the Hulk." "I know," Bruce replied. "But the Ancient One was clear. We're the only ones who can keep him occupied long enough for the others to succeed." He looked at his hands, watching them tremble slightly. "I've spent years learning to control the Hulk, to keep him locked away, unless absolutely necessary. Now you're asking me to let him out and keep him out for as long as possible. I ask nothing, my friend. This is your choice." Bruce laughed bitterly. "Is it? Because it feels like the only choice. Let the monster loose or watch Earth burn." He took off his glasses, tucking them carefully into a protective case. "At least this time, I can point him at something that deserves smashing." "Vader is formidable," Thor warned. "His dark power is unlike anything I've faced, even with both of us. Then we'd better hit him hard and fast." Bruce's eyes were fully green now, his breathing becoming heavier. "Because the other guy is already tired of waiting." Steve Rogers appeared, shield on his back, his Captain America suit showing scorch marks from the Central Park battle. "Everyone's in position. We're just waiting for the signal." "Which is?" Bruce asked. "Tony and his team launch for the Death Star. The second they break atmosphere, the Empire will scramble fighters to intercept. That's when we hit the ground forces, draw their attention, force them to commit. Make them think the real threat is down here while Tony's team goes for the kill shot." Thor nodded. "A sound strategy. The Empire's arrogance will be their undoing. They cannot imagine primitives striking at their ultimate weapon." "Let's hope you're right." Steve activated his comm. "All teams, this is Captain America. Stand by for operation commencement. Remember, we're not just fighting for New York. We're fighting for everyone who's ever looked up at the stars and dreamed of freedom. Earth doesn't bow to tyrants. Not today. Not ever." Across the city, heroes and soldiers checked their weapons one final time. Dora Milaje warriors chanted prayers to Bast. Sorcerers centered themselves for the mystic battle ahead. Shield agents made peace with the likelihood they wouldn't see tomorrow. And high above, aboard the Super Star Destroyer Executor, Emperor Palpatine sat upon his throne, watching the planet below with yellow eyes that burned with dark anticipation. They prepare to strike, Darth Vader observed, standing before his master's holographic projection. I can feel their determination through the Force. They mean to attack rather than wait for our deadline. Yes, Palpatine said with satisfaction. How delightfully futile. Let them come with their champions and their primitive weapons. Let them believe themselves capable of victory. He leaned forward, his expression predatory. When their hopes are highest, when they believe they might actually succeed, that is when we shall crush them absolutely. Deploy all ground forces, scramble the fighter wings, give them the battle they seek. And if they strike at the Death Star, they will try, Palpatine acknowledged. But Grand Moff Tarkin assures me the station's defenses are impenetrable. No fighter, no matter how skilled the pilot, can navigate the trench system while under fire from our best gunners. Their assault team will die in the attempt, and their deaths will break the spirit of those below. The Thunder God concerns me, Vader admitted. His power is considerable, and there is another, a presence I sense but cannot identify. Rage given form, strength without limit. Then you will face them both, Palpatine commanded. Prove your worth as my apprentice, Lord Vader. Break their champions. Show them what it means to stand against a Sith Lord. His smile was cruel. And if you succeed, perhaps I shall descend myself to witness their final surrender. The hologram faded. Vader turned to the viewport, his hand resting on his lightsaber. Through the Force, he could feel them. The warriors preparing to face him. The Thunder God's confidence. The other presence, the Green One, struggling for control over bestial rage. They were strong, perhaps the strongest opponents he'd faced since the Jedi Purge. But strength alone didn't guarantee victory, and Vader had been forged in darkness that would consume their light. All TIE squadrons, prepare for launch, he commanded. Ground forces, begin immediate deployment to all landing zones. This battle ends today. In the hangar bay, the modified Quinjet's engines hummed to life. Tony's voice came across the comm to all Avengers. Death Star assault team is go. See you on the other side. The Quinjet lifted off, accelerating toward the atmosphere. Within seconds, it was a silver streak climbing toward space. On the Death Star's command deck, alarms began blaring. Fighter craft detected, departing from planet surface, an officer reported. Trajectory suggests they're heading directly for this station. Scramble all fighters, Grand Moff Tarkin ordered calmly. Destroy them before they can become a nuisance. And alert Lord Vader, the battle has begun. Across Earth's orbit, hangar bays opened on dozens of Star Destroyers. TIE fighters poured out like insects from a disturbed nest, hundreds of them, their distinctive twin ion engines screaming as they formed attack formations. In the Quinjet, Jarvis's voice was calm despite the approaching swarm. Sir, I'm detecting approximately 400 TIE fighters vectoring to intercept. ETA to engagement, 45 seconds. Well, Tony said, checking his weapon systems one final time. Here we go. And on the ground, as the TIE fighters launched, Steve Rogers raised his hand, then dropped it. All forces, engage. The battle for Earth had begun. The first shot fired in Earth's defense came from a Wakandan sonic cannon positioned on the roof of the Empire State Building. The weapon discharged with a sound like reality tearing, and a focused beam of vibranium-enhanced sonic energy lanced across the sky toward the Imperial landing zone in Brooklyn. The beam struck the Imperial shield generator dead center. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the shield flickered, wavered, and collapsed with a cascade of sparks that rained down on the Stormtroopers below. Wakanda forever! The battle cry erupted from 5,000 throats as Wakandan warriors charged. T'Challa was at the front, his Black Panther suit absorbing kinetic energy with each bound as he leapt from rooftop to rooftop. Behind him, the Dora Milaje moved in perfect formation, their vibranium spears launching energy pulses that struck Stormtrooper armor with devastating effect. The white plastoid that had turned aside blaster bolts across a galaxy cracked and shattered under Wakandan technology designed to counter vibranium itself. The Stormtroopers responded with disciplined fire. Blaster bolts, superheated plasma, streaked through the air in coordinated volleys. Several Wakandan warriors fell, their shields absorbing multiple hits before overloading. But for every warrior that fell, the Dora Milaje closed ranks and pushed forward. "Concentrate fire on the transport," Okoye commanded, her spear launching a pulse that struck an Imperial landing barge. The explosion tore through the ship's port side, sending it listing toward the ground. Stormtroopers poured from the damaged barge even as it crashed, their training evident in how quickly they established defensive positions. E-11 blaster rifles tracked targets with mechanical precision, their fire patterns designed to suppress and eliminate. But they hadn't counted on Wakanda. T'Challa hit the Imperial lines like a kinetic missile. His suits stored energy, releasing in a shockwave that sent a dozen Stormtroopers flying. His claws, vibranium alloy sharp enough to cut through steel, tore through armor like paper. He moved with the fluid grace of a predator, each strike calculated, each motion purposeful. "For Earth!" he roared, and his warriors answered with renewed ferocity. In Times Square, the Ancient One raised her hands, and the mystical shield protecting Manhattan flared to life. Turbo laser fire from the Star Destroyer overhead struck the golden barrier and dispersed harmlessly, and the energy redirected into dimensional pockets where it could harm no one. "All sorcerers, begin portal operations," she commanded. Across the city, masters of the mystic arts opened portals with precise coordination. Wakandan warriors stepped through and emerged behind Imperial lines. Shield forces appeared on rooftops with clear firing lanes. The battlefield became fluid, unpredictable. Every fixed position suddenly vulnerable to attack from angles the Empire's tactical computers couldn't anticipate. Wong materialized beside the Ancient One through a portal. "The Emperor's presence in the Force, it's growing stronger. He's watching us closely now." "Let him watch," the Ancient One replied, her hands weaving complex patterns. "Let him see what happens when an empire of steel faces masters of the impossible." In the sky above, the space battle had become a maelstrom of violence and death. Tony Stark twisted the Quinjet through a barrel roll that would have killed an ordinary pilot from the G-forces alone. A TIE fighter exploded behind him, victim of a perfectly placed micromissile from Rhodey's war machine systems. "Jarvis, how many do we have on our tail?" 73 and increasing, sir. The Imperial fighters are faster than projected." "Of course they are." Tony jinked left as green turbolaser bolts streaked past the Quinjet's cockpit. "Okay, new plan. Rhodey, Sam, you two run interference. Draw them away from the Quinjet. Clint and I make the run on the Death Star." "That's suicide," Sam said, even as his Wakandan wings deployed, propelling him out of the Quinjet through the rear access port. "We're all committing suicide today," Rhodey replied, his war machine armor detaching from its maglocks. "Might as well make it count." The two armored heroes peeled away from the Quinjet, immediately drawing the attention of dozens of TIE fighters. Rhodey's shoulder-mounted minigun spun up and began spitting 20mm rounds at targets that moved like they were reading his mind. Several TIE fighters exploded, their unshielded hulls vulnerable to kinetic weapons, but more kept coming. Sam dove through the swarm, his wings' energy weapons firing precisely targeted bursts. A TIE fighter disintegrated under his fire. Another spun out of control, its pilot's trajectory calculations disrupted by Sam's impossible aerial maneuvers. "I'm an Air Force pararescue who fights with alien tech," Sam shouted into the comm. "Of course I can fly in space." But the TIE fighters were adapting, but their pilots, among the Empire's finest, began coordinating their attack patterns, using numerical superiority to corner the two heroes. Rhodey took a glancing hit that depleted his shields by 40%. Sam's left wing sparked as a turbo laser bolt grazed it. "We can't hold them forever," Rhodey warned. "Don't need forever," Tony replied, pushing the Quinjet to maximum acceleration toward the Death Star's surface. "Just need long enough." The battle station loomed before him, growing from moon-sized to world-filling. Its surface was a maze of trenches, weapon towers, and defensive emplacements. Tony could see the equatorial trench now, the one that led to the thermal exhaust port, the one that was their only chance. "Sir, I'm detecting massive energy spikes from the Death Star's superlaser," Jarvis warned. "It appears to be entering final charging sequence." "How long?" "Approximately 8 minutes until firing capacity is reached." 8 minutes. 8 minutes to fly through a defended trench, avoid getting shot down by the Empire's best gunners, and put ordnance into a target 2 meters wide. "Clint, you still with me?" Tony asked. "Right behind you, Stark," Clint confirmed from his position at the Quinjet's rear weapons station. "Got my special arrow loaded. Just get me that shot." "No pressure or anything?" Tony angled the Quinjet toward the trench entrance. Behind him, he could see War Machine and Falcon still engaged with the TIE swarm, buying him precious seconds with their lives hanging in the balance. Then the Quinjet entered the trench, and all hell broke loose. On the ground, the battle for Brooklyn had devolved into brutal close-quarters combat. The Wakandan warriors had pushed deep into the Imperial landing zone, but the Stormtroopers were fighting back with the discipline of soldiers who'd conquered planets. They established overlapping fields of fire, used their numerical superiority to suppress advancing forces, and called in air support from TIE bombers that screamed overhead dropping ordnance. One such bomber's payload struck a Wakandan position, the explosion consuming a dozen warriors in an instant. The survivors pushed forward anyway, their battle cries drowning out the screams of the dying. T'Challa found himself surrounded by Stormtroopers. They fired from all sides, plasma bolts converging on his position. His suit absorbed the kinetic energy. 1 shot, 2, 5, 10, until he was glowing with stored power. Then he released it. The shockwave radiated outward in a sphere of purple energy, sending Stormtroopers tumbling like leaves in a hurricane. T'Challa didn't pause, immediately pressing his advantage to tear through the stunned survivors with claws that left armor and flesh in ribbons. But for every Stormtrooper that fell, it seemed 2 more took their place. The Empire had committed ground forces in the tens of thousands, and they were pouring from landing barges across 3 cities simultaneously. In London, British Special Forces fought alongside hastily arrived Wakandan reinforcements against Imperial forces that had taken Parliament. In Beijing, Chinese military units coordinated with shield assets to hold the line against Stormtroopers advancing through the Forbidden City. This wasn't just New York's fight anymore. This was global. And in Central Park, as the battle raged across the planet, Thor and Bruce Banner waited for the enemy they'd been tasked to face. They didn't wait long. A Lambda-class Imperial shuttle descended through the chaos, its shields absorbing fire from ground forces that tried to intercept it. The shuttle landed with precise elegance in the center of the park, and its boarding ramp lowered. Darth Vader emerged into the morning light like a demon from mythology. His black armor absorbed the sunlight. His cape billowed in the wind generated by his shuttle's repulsors, and his mechanical breathing echoed across the battlefield with the rhythm of inevitability. Behind him came elite stormtroopers, not standard infantry, but Imperial Royal Guards in crimson armor, to each one a warrior trained personally by the Emperor himself. They fanned out in defensive formation as Vader surveyed the battlefield with the cold calculation of a predator. His masked gaze settled on Thor and Bruce, standing 50 meters away. "The Thunder God," Vader's voice resonated through his respirator. "And another. I can feel your rage, creature. It calls to the dark side like a beacon." Bruce's skin had already taken on a greenish tint. His muscles were swelling, his shirt beginning to tear. "You should have stayed in your own galaxy," he said, his voice deepening, roughening. "Because you just made a really big mistake." Thor stepped forward, Mjolnir crackling with barely contained lightning. "I am Thor Odinson, and in the name of Midgard, I challenge you, Dark Lord. Face me if you dare." Vader's hand moved to his lightsaber. "You wish to die first? So be it." He activated the blade. The crimson lightsaber hummed to life, and the sound of it seemed to resonate with something primal and terrible. The sound of a weapon forged from hatred and pain. Thor raised Mjolnir and called down lightning. The bolt that struck from the clear sky was massive. Enough electricity to power New York City for a day, concentrated into a single devastating strike. It hit Vader dead center, engulfing him in a corona of pure energy that would have vaporized any normal being. When the lightning faded, Vader still stood. His armor was scorched, smoking slightly, but he was standing. One hand was raised, palm out, and around it the Force had created a barrier that had absorbed the worst of Thor's attack. "Impressive," Vader acknowledged, "but insufficient." He thrust his hand forward, and Thor was lifted off his feet, yanked through the air by invisible Force grip. Vader's lightsaber came up in a strike that would have bisected the God of Thunder. Bruce Banner roared, and the sound was no longer human. The Hulk emerged in an explosion of gamma-irradiated rage. Green skin replaced pink. Muscles expanded beyond biological possibility. The tactical gear Bruce had been wearing tore away like tissue paper as the strongest Avenger grew to his full 8 feet of fury. "Hulk smashed Darkman," the Green Giant bellowed. He charged, and each footfall left cracks in the ground. 20 tons of rage crossed 50 meters in 3 seconds. His fist, large enough to palm a basketball like a marble, swung at Vader's head with enough force to shatter concrete. Vader released Thor and spun, his lightsaber coming up in a defensive position. The Hulk's fist struck the energy blade. For a moment, something impossible happened. The Hulk's fist actually stopped, blocked by a weapon made of pure energy. The lightsaber sank slightly into green skin, and the smell of burning flesh filled the air. Then the Hulk headbutted Vader with the force of a wrecking ball. The Sith Lord flew backward, crashing through his own shuttle with an impact that crumpled the Imperial craft like a tin can. The Royal Guards opened fire immediately, their blasters trained on the Hulk. The plasma bolt struck the Hulk's chest, his arms, his face. They burned, and the Hulk roared in pain and fury. But he didn't stop. He didn't slow down. He got angrier. "Hurt Hulk! Make Hulk mad!" The Green Giant grabbed one of the Royal Guards and used him as a club to batter the others. The crimson armor crunched under the Hulk's grip, and when he threw the guard aside, the warrior didn't get up. Thor recovered, shaking his head to clear it. He saw Vader emerging from the wreckage of the shuttle, saw the Dark Lord's respirator breathing quickening with what might have been pain or anger. "Together," Thor called to the Hulk. "We take him together." The Hulk grunted understanding, and for a moment, God and monster stood side by side. Vader faced them both, his lightsaber held in a defensive stance. Around him, the Force gathered like a storm, dark and terrible. "You are strong," he admitted. "Stronger than most I've faced. But strength without discipline is merely chaos. And chaos cannot stand against the dark side." He raised his left hand and pushed. The Force rippled outward in a shock wave that bent trees and cracked stone. Thor was hurled backward, tumbling through the air. The Hulk dug his feet in, his massive frame barely budging, but even he slid back several meters from the telekinetic assault. "Hulk not move," the green giant declared, charging forward again. And Vader met him, lightsaber versus fists, dark side versus gamma rage, in a battle that would determine whether Earth's champions could stand against the Empire's might. Above, Tony Stark's Quinjet screamed through the Death Star trench at speeds that pushed the craft to its engineering limits. Turbo laser fire filled the air around him, green bolts that missed by meters, then feet, then inches. One struck the Quinjet's rear shield, and the Wakandan generator overloaded with a shower of sparks. "Shields down," Jarvis reported. "Sir, the next hit will be catastrophic." "Then we don't get hit." Tony juked the Quinjet through a series of impossible maneuvers, the targeting computer in his helmet working overtime to plot trajectories that defied physics. Behind him, Clint held onto his safety harness with white knuckles, his arrow nocked and ready. "Tony, how much longer?" "Exhaust port is 20 seconds ahead. On my mark, you take the shot." 20 seconds. An eternity under fire. A TIE fighter dove into the trench behind them, its pilot skilled enough to match Tony's evasive maneuvers. Green bolts streaked past the Quinjet, one grazing the hull and leaving a molten scar. "We've got company," Tony warned. The TIE fighter's next shot was perfect, a direct hit trajectory that would core the Quinjet's engines. Then, War Machine appeared from above, dropping into the trench with repulsors blazing. His minigun found the TIE fighter and tore it apart in a hail of 20mm rounds. "Go!" Rhodey shouted over the comm. "I've got your 6. Tony pushed the Quinjet to maximum acceleration. The exhaust port appeared ahead, a small opening in the trench wall, barely 2 meters wide, exactly where Jarvis had predicted. "Clint, now!" Clint Barton, master archer, husband, father, and Avenger, drew his bow and released the arrow in one fluid motion perfected over decades of impossible shots. The StarkTech explosive arrow, tipped with vibranium and carrying enough explosive payload to crack a bunker, flew true. It entered the exhaust port dead center. For 2 seconds, nothing happened. Tony pulled the Quinjet into a vertical climb, escaping the trench as alarms blared across his systems. Then the Death Star's reactor detonated. The explosion started small, deep in the battle station's core. Then it cascaded, expanding through power conduits and structural supports, growing from a spark to an inferno to an apocalypse. Secondary explosions rippled across the Death Star's surface as fuel reserves ignited. Weapons batteries exploded, and the station's own immense power tore itself apart. From Earth, it looked like a new sun had been born, a sphere of fire and destruction that consumed the Empire's ultimate weapon in seconds. Grand Moff Tarkin had exactly enough time to whisper, "Impossible," before the command deck vaporized around him. On the ground, when every combatant, human and Imperial alike, stopped fighting and stared at the sky as the Death Star died in fire and fury. And aboard the Executor, Emperor Palpatine rose from his throne, his yellow eyes widening with something that might have been surprise or might have been fury. "Lord Vader," he hissed, "end this, Now, the shockwave from the Death Star's destruction rippled across space, a visible wave of superheated gas and debris that buffeted the Imperial fleet. Aboard the Executor, bridge officers struggled to maintain their footing as the Superstar Destroyer's inertial dampeners compensated for the blast. Emperor Palpatine gripped the armrests of his throne, his yellowed fingernails digging into the metal. Through the Force, he had felt every death aboard the Death Star. Thousands of Imperial personnel snuffed out in an instant. But more than that, he felt something far more dangerous: hope. On the planet below, in every city where humans fought Stormtroopers, the impossible victory had sparked something the Empire had spent decades crushing: the belief that resistance could succeed. "My lord." Admiral Piet approached cautiously, his face pale. "The Death Star has been destroyed. Grand Moff Tarkin is confirmed dead. Shall I order the fleet to withdraw and..." "Withdraw?" Palpatine's voice cracked like thunder, and Force lightning arced from his fingertips to the deck plating. Officers stepped back involuntarily. "The Galactic Empire does not retreat from primitives. We possess 37 Star Destroyers, tens of thousands of troops, and the full might of the dark side." His eyes burned with malevolent fury. "Order all ships to commence orbital bombardment. I want their cities burning. I want their champions watching helplessly as everything they fought to protect turns to ash." "My lord, Lord Vader is currently engaged on the planet's surface." "Then Lord Vader will demonstrate why he is my apprentice." Palpatine interrupted coldly. "Commence bombardment, now." In Central Park, Vader felt his master's command through their Force bond. The Emperor's rage fueled him, feeding the dark side that flowed through his veins like poison and power combined. The Hulk charged again, massive fists swinging with enough force to pulverize steel. Vader didn't try to block. Instead, he moved. Force-enhanced speed allowed him to sidestep the blow by centimeters, his lightsaber slashing across the Hulk's arm as he passed. The energy blade cut deep, cauterizing as it went. The Hulk roared in pain and fury, his regeneration already working to close the wound, even as Vader struck again, the crimson blade finding green flesh with surgical precision. "Hurt Hulk!" the monster bellowed. "Make Hulk angrier!" And he was getting angrier. With each wound, each moment of pain, the Hulk's rage grew, and with it, his strength. His next punch came faster, harder. Vader caught it with the Force, holding the massive fist inches from his mask. But the effort required was noticeably greater than before. Thor saw his opening. He hurled Mjolnir with all his godly strength, the hammer trailing lightning as it flew. "Vader!" The Sith Lord sensed the attack through precognitive Force awareness and released the Hulk to spin and catch Mjolnir with his free hand, using the Force to grip the enchanted weapon in midair. For a moment, God and Sith were locked in a telekinetic tug-of-war, Mjolnir suspended between them, vibrating with contained power. Thor pulled through his mystical connection to the hammer. Vader pulled through the dark side. Then the Hulk hit Vader from behind with a double-fisted slam that drove the Sith Lord into the ground, creating a crater 3 meters deep. Thor recalled Mjolnir and landed beside the Hulk. Both warriors stared at the crater, breathing hard. "Did we..." Thor began. Vader exploded from the crater in a Force-propelled leap. His armor cracked, but his lightsaber still burning. He landed between them and unleashed. Force lightning erupted from his hand, not the controlled precision he typically used, but raw dark side fury channeled through rage and pain. The electricity arced through both Thor and the Hulk, and even beings of their power felt it. Thor's lightning resistance helped, but this wasn't natural electricity. This was the dark side made manifest. He fell to one knee, Mjolnir slipping from his grip. The Hulk took the full brunt and screamed. His nervous system, even supercharged with gamma radiation, couldn't entirely resist the dark side's corruption. He staggered, skin smoking, muscles spasming. Vader advanced, maintaining the lightning assault. The Emperor commands your world's destruction, and I am his instrument. Then portals opened around him. Dozens of them, golden circles of mystical energy. The Ancient One stepped through one portal, Wong through another, and 40 more masters of the mystic arts through the rest. They formed a circle around Vader, hands moving in synchronized patterns. You face one foe well, Sith Lord, the Ancient One said calmly. Let us see how you handle many. The sorcerers struck as one. Magical chains materialized from thin air, wrapping around Vader's limbs. Dimensional rifts opened beneath his feet, trying to drag him into the mirror dimension. Elemental forces, fire, ice, wind, converged on his position from multiple angles. Vader's force lightning cut out as he focused on defense. His lightsaber spun in a defensive pattern, cutting through magical chains. He used the force to anchor himself against the dimensional rifts. But even his power had limits, and the coordinated assault from 50 trained mystics was overwhelming. Hulk help magic people. The Green Giant, recovered from the lightning attack, charged into the mystic circle and grabbed Vader in a bear hug that would have crushed steel. Vader struggled, but the Hulk's grip was unyielding. The sorcerers intensified their assault, magical energy swirling around the trapped Sith Lord like a hurricane. And that was when the orbital bombardment began. Green turbolaser bolts the size of telephone poles struck Manhattan from orbit. The first hit obliterated a skyscraper in Midtown, the building simply ceasing to exist in a flash of superheated plasma. The second struck near Times Square, creating a crater that consumed 2 city blocks. The Ancient One's mystical shield flared, absorbing several strikes, but even her power had limits. The fleet is firing on the city. We must redirect. A turbo laser bolt struck the mystic circle directly. The Ancient One and a dozen masters threw up defensive shields at the last instant, but 3 sorcerers were vaporized immediately. The rest were thrown backward by the blast, their concentration shattered. The Hulk's grip loosened just enough. Vader channeled the force through his entire body and pushed with everything he had. The Hulk flew backward, crashing through the remains of the Imperial shuttle. Thor, recovering, threw Mjolnir again, but Vader was already moving, force sprinting away from the immediate combat zone with speed that blurred his form. He activated his comm. All Imperial forces, the Emperor has given the order. Commence total assault. Spare nothing, leave nothing standing. Across New York, London, and Beijing, the Imperial commanders received the order and implemented it without hesitation. In Brooklyn, Stormtroopers stopped fighting defensively and pushed forward with renewed aggression. TAT walkers that had been held in reserve lumbered forward. Massive 4-legged assault vehicles that towered over buildings, their head-mounted heavy turbolaser cannons swiveling to target Wakandan positions. The first AT-AT fired, and a Wakandan shield generator exploded, taking its defending warriors with it. Fall back, Okoye commanded, her tactical assessment immediate. They couldn't hold against walkers without anti-armor support. Reform at secondary positions. The Dora Milaje retreated in good order, firing as they went, but the AT-ATs advanced implacably. Their armor was too thick for spears, their height gave them commanding fields of fire, and their very presence was psychologically devastating. T'Challa saw his forces being pushed back and made a decision. Sister, I need the Dragon Flyers, now! In Wakanda, thousands of miles away, Shuri received the message and activated the remote piloting systems. Within seconds, a dozen Wakandan aircraft, sleek, dragon-shaped vessels armed with vibranium weapons, appeared through portals opened by the sorcerers. The dragonflyers screamed over the battlefield and engaged the AT-ATs with precision strikes. Vibranium-tipped missiles struck the walkers' leg joints, the only vulnerable spots, and two of the massive vehicles collapsed, their severed legs unable to support their weight. But there were more AT-ATs, and overhead, the Star Destroyers continued their bombardment. In the skies above Earth, Tony Stark's Quinjet limped toward atmosphere, its engines damaged and shields completely depleted. Behind him, the Death Star's debris field spread across orbital space, a graveyard of Imperial hubris and thousands of dead. "Jarvis, damage report," Tony said, his voice tight with exhaustion. "Primary engines at 40%. Life support nominal. Hull integrity compromised in 17 locations. Sir, now we need to land immediately." "Working on it." Tony angled toward New York, but his sensors showed the orbital bombardment in progress. "Oh no. Jarvis, get me Steve." "Static then." "Tony?" Steve's voice was strained, the sounds of battle clear in the background. "The Death Star, I saw—" "We did it, but the Empire's pissed," Tony interrupted. "They're bombarding the city. The fleet's going full scorched earth. We're holding them on the ground, but if they keep hitting us from orbit—" Steve's transmission cut off as an explosion thundered through the comm. "I'm coming down," Tony said. "Rhodey, Sam, status?" "Still breathing," Rhodey replied, his war machine armor visible through the Quinjet's cameras, flying alongside with Sam. "Barely. My ammunition's exhausted and my armor's held together with prayers and duct tape. My wings are half melted and I'm pretty sure I'm bleeding," Sam added. "But I can still fly. Where do you need us?" "Help with the ground battle. I'm going after the fleet." Tony's mind was already calculating trajectories, power requirements, impossibilities. "Jarvis, plot me a course to the nearest Star Destroyer." "Sir, that is inadvisable. Your armor is damaged, you have limited ammunition, and Star Destroyers are designed to repel exactly this kind of assault." "Plot it anyway." "Stark, that's suicide," Rhodey said flatly. "Even if you reach a Star Destroyer, you can't destroy it alone. Watch me." But before Tony could execute his desperate plan, the sky over New York lit up with new arrivals. Ice Bifrost beams, columns of rainbow light that tore through space itself, materialized above Manhattan. And through them came the armies of Asgard. Not a handful of warriors defying Odin's orders, the full might of the realm eternal. 10,000 Einherjar, Asgard's elite soldiers, appeared in the sky, carried by crystalline flying craft. They wore golden armor that gleamed in the morning sun, carried weapons forged in the fires of Nidavellir, and sang songs of war that echoed across dimensions. Leading them was Odin Allfather himself, mounted on his 8-legged steed Sleipnir, Gungnir, the spear that never missed, clutched in his ancient hand. Warriors of Asgard. Odin's voice boomed across the battlefield, enhanced by magic to be heard by every combatant. "The 9 realms are under my protection, and Midgard is one of those realms." He pointed Gungnir at the nearest Star Destroyer. "These invaders have mistaken mercy for weakness. Show them their error." The Einherjar attacked. Asgardian warriors descended on the Star Destroyers like a swarm of golden wasps. Their weapons, enchanted by millennia of sorcery, struck Imperial shields and penetrated. Energy barriers designed to stop turbo-laser blasts couldn't account for magic that operated on different principles entirely. Explosions rippled across the Star Destroyer's hull as Asgardian warriors breached the armor and fought their way inside. The Einherjar were veterans of wars that spanned centuries. Warriors who had fought dark elves, frost giants, and cosmic horrors. Stormtroopers, for all their training, had never faced anything like them. On the Executor's Bridge, Admiral Piet watched in horror as his fleet, the greatest military force in the galaxy, was boarded by warriors wielding swords and hammers. "My Lord Emperor, Asgardian forces have joined the battle. Our shields are ineffective against their weapons." Palpatine's rage had reached a crescendo. The primitive world was supposed to break. The Death Star's destruction was supposed to be followed by swift, brutal subjugation. Instead, armies from another realm entirely had materialized, and his fleet was taking casualties. "Unacceptable," he hissed. Through the Force, he reached out to Vader. "My apprentice, kill their champions. Kill them now, or I shall descend and do it myself." In Central Park, Vader felt his master's fury like a whip across his soul. The Hulk and Thor were recovering, preparing for another assault. The sorcerers were regrouping. And now Asgardian warriors were pouring into the battlefield through Bifrost beams. He was outnumbered, wounded. His armor was cracked, his respirator damaged enough that each breath came with a whistle of escaping air. But Darth Vader had not survived the Jedi Purge, the Clone Wars, and decades of Imperial service by giving up when the odds were against him. He reached deep into the dark side, drawing on reserves of power he typically kept locked away. The pain from his wounds became fuel. The fear he sensed from dying stormtroopers across the city became strength. The Emperor's rage became his rage. Around him, the Force gathered like a storm about to break. "You want me to end this?" Vader said, though no one but himself could hear. "Then I shall." He raised both hands toward the sky and began to pull. On the Executor, alarms blared. "Admiral, we're detecting massive gravitational anomalies. Something is pulling at the ship." Piet looked out the viewport and saw the impossible. His Star Destroyer, 1,700 meters of Imperial military might, was being dragged down toward the planet's surface by invisible force. Vader was using the Force to pull a Star Destroyer from orbit. "Full power to engines," Piet shouted. "Counter-thrust, all power." The Executor's engines roared to maximum output, fighting against the telekinetic grip. Other Star Destroyers broke formation, their own systems detecting the gravitational anomaly and moving to assist. In Central Park, Vader's body trembled with the effort. Blood vessels burst behind his mask. His respirator labored to provide oxygen to lungs working beyond capacity. Every muscle, every nerve, every fiber of his being strained against the impossible task. He was trying to crash a Star Destroyer, and he was succeeding. The Executor dropped 50 meters, then another 50. The ship's bow tilted toward Earth's atmosphere as Vader's power overwhelmed even Imperial engineering. "No," the Ancient One breathed, recognizing the catastrophic potential. "If that ship crashes into Manhattan, millions die," Thor finished, his eyes widening with horror. "Vader, stop this!" The Hulk charged, but Vader's concentration was absolute. He didn't even acknowledge the green monster's approach. His entire existence had narrowed to a single purpose: obey the Emperor's command by any means necessary. If he couldn't kill the champions directly, he would bury them under 1,700 meters of crashing starship, even if he died in the process. The dark side cared nothing for self-preservation, only for victory. And as the Executor descended toward Manhattan, its shadow covering the city like a shroud, Every defender on Earth realized they had seconds to prevent a catastrophe that would make the Death Star look merciful. The Star Destroyer executor filled the sky above Manhattan, a blade-shaped shadow of imminent doom. Its sheer scale was incomprehensible. A city unto itself made of dark metal, now falling from the heavens with the groaning shriek of overstressed hull plates and screaming engines. The immense downdraft from its descent whipped through the streets, shattering windows and toppling weakened structures. Flames licked from damaged engine ports, trailing thick black smoke across the morning sun. In the psychic space between moments, the Ancient One saw the branching futures. In nearly all of them, the Executor crashed. The destruction was apocalyptic, erasing not just the battlefield, but the island of Manhattan and beyond, killing millions instantly. In a few flickering strands, the ship was stopped, but at a cost that crippled Earth defenders so completely that the Empire's remaining forces finished the job. There was only one path, narrow and razor-thin. It required a sacrifice she had long been prepared to make, but not for this. Not for an enemy from outside the cosmos. "Wong," she called, her voice cutting through the wind and chaos. "Formation Delta, all masters to me. We must cast a telekinetic cushion across the entire island." "The strain," Wong protested, even as he began forming the necessary sigils. "Will kill us, or worse, do it." Around her, the surviving masters of the mystic arts gathered. Golden mandalas bloomed in a massive circle, their light a defiant challenge to the descending darkness. The air shimmered as they pooled their power, weaving a net of mystical energy designed not to stop the ship, but to slow its fall and control the point of impact. Thor watched, understanding dawning. He is using the ship itself as his weapon. The coward cannot defeat us, so he seeks to bury us. "Hulk, not afraid of falling rock," the green giant roared. But even he stared upward with a primal recognition of the scale of the threat. He pounded his chest, a challenge to the sky. "Hulk, smash bigger." Vader stood at the epicenter of the cataclysm, both hands raised, fingers curled into claws as if physically gripping the mile-long vessel. His respirator was a ragged, wet sound. Cracks webbed his chest plate, and sparks spit from damaged servos in his limbs. The dark side poured through him like a flood through a crumbling dam, fueling an act of telekinesis that would have killed a lesser being minutes ago. He was a conduit, his body breaking under the strain, sustained only by hatred and the Emperor's will. Tony Stark's battered Quinjet screamed into the park, skidding to a halt that tore up 50 feet of turf. The cockpit hissed open, and he stumbled out, his armor scorched and dented. He took one look at the sky, and his blood ran cold. "Jarvis, analysis. Now." The Executor is in an uncontrolled descent. Current trajectory predicts impact in the upper bay in approximately 90 seconds. The resulting tsunami and kinetic energy release will be terminal for the northeastern seaboard. "He's not trying to hit the city," Steve Rogers said, arriving at a sprint, his uniform torn and shield dented from the ground, fighting. He pointed at Vader. "He's the guidance system. He's aiming it." "We have to break his concentration," Natasha said. Nick appearing beside them, a blaster burn searing her tactical suit. Clint knocked an arrow, his hand steady despite the world-ending shadow above. "I'm open to suggestions." Before anyone could act, the air crackled with power. Thor raised Mjolnir, his face a mask of divine fury. "No, this ends now. The All-Father has committed Asgard to this battle. I will not see his aid repaid with our failure." He looked at Tony. "Man of Iron, can your suit reach that ship?" "What's left of it, yeah. Why?" "Then take me to it." Understanding flashed in Tony's eyes. "You want to cut the head off the snake?" while he's busy playing tug-of-war with a Star Destroyer. He has anchored himself to it. His will is the chain. We break the ship, we break his focus. Or we all die in a slightly different explosion, Tony muttered, but his faceplate slammed down. Jarvis, give me every ounce of power we have left. Rhodey, Sam, cover us. The two armored heroes banked in the sky, drawing fire from the few remaining TIE fighters that weren't fleeing the gravitational anomaly. Go, Rhodey's voice crackled. We'll keep the flies off. Thor grabbed Tony's outstretched armored hand. To glory or Valhalla, Stark? Let's aim for option A. Repulsors flaring, Iron Man shot skyward, hauling the God of Thunder directly toward the belly of the falling Leviathan. Turbo laser fire from the Executor's point defense batteries streaked around them, but the gunners were distracted, their ship lurching violently. Tony wove through the storm, his sensors mapping hull weaknesses. There, the main bridge tower. Where that's the brain. Then we shall give it a headache it will not forget. Thor roared. They slammed onto the command tower's viewport. Through the transparent steel, they could see the chaos inside. Officers scrambling, Admiral Piet shouting orders. And at the center, on a raised platform, the shimmering blue hologram of Emperor Palpatine, his form radiating palpable malice even at a distance. Thor didn't hesitate. He raised Mjolnir and brought it down with all his strength upon the reinforced viewport. The transparent steel, designed to withstand micrometeoroids and laser blasts, did not withstand the enchantment of a dwarf-forged Uru weapon and the might of a god. It didn't just crack, it exploded inward in a shower of crystalline shards. Atmospheric containment alarms shrieked. Wind howled into the bridge, sucking consoles, datapads, us and unlucky officers out into the void. Piet grabbed a railing, his face a mask of terror. Palpatine's hologram flickered, his gaze locking onto the two intruders. His voice, thin and distorted by the hologram and the screaming wind, cut through the chaos. So, the insects have reached the nest. Your defiance will be remembered as a footnote to your extinction. Your reign ends here, tyrant, Thor bellowed, lightning arcing from his body into the bridge consoles, overloading systems in showers of sparks. Tony, the reactor, Thor shouted. This ship is a weapon aimed at my friends. Destroy it. Tony was already moving, his suit's remaining ordnance highlighted in his HUD. He had one missile left, a concentrated plasma charge designed for bunker busting. Jarvis, best path to the main reactor? Access shaft 3 levels down, on starboard side. But sir, the structural integrity is failing. A reactor breach at this altitude will cause a mid-air disintegration instead of a planetary impact. I like those odds better. He turned to Thor. You keep his attention. Thor didn't need telling twice. He advanced toward the flickering hologram of the Emperor, Mjolnir crackling. Face me, Phantom, or are you as hollow as your threats? Palpatine's image smiled, a ghastly rictus of hate. You fight a shadow, Odinson. My true power is beyond your comprehension. Lord Vader, kill them. On the ground, the Emperor's command, transmitted through the Force, was a whip of fire across Vader's mind. He saw the breach on his ship's bridge. He felt the intruders. A lesser focus would have shattered. Darth Vader's focus did not shatter. It divided. With a roar of pure, undiluted dark side power that tore from his broken vocoder, he performed the impossible. He maintained his telekinetic grip on the Executor with one hemisphere of his mind, while, with the other, he reached out across the miles of empty space to the bridge. On the Executor, a console ripped from its moorings and hurtled toward Thor. The God of Thunder smashed it aside, but another followed. then another, thrown with the strength of the Force. Thor was driven back toward the shattered viewport, forced to defend himself against a storm of metal, while the ship itself shuddered and fell around them. Below, the strain manifested physically on Vader. Armor plates buckled, the lenses of his mask cracked, smoke and fluids leaked from his joints. But he did not yield. Tony found the access shaft and dove into the darkness, his repulsors lighting the way. "Jarvis, how long?" 45 seconds to catastrophic altitude. The Master's spell is slowing the descent, but not enough. Then we do it faster. He rocketed down the shaft, bursting into the main reactor chamber, a cavernous space dominated by a pulsing, cylindrical hypermatter core. Warning lights flashed crimson. He didn't bother with finesse. He aimed his last missile. "This is for every planet you've bullied, for Alderaan." He fired. The plasma missile streaked across the chamber and embedded itself in the reactor housing. A high-pitched whine built to a crescendo. "Time to go?" Tony turned and blasted back up the shaft as fast as his damaged repulsors could carry him. "Thor, incoming boom!" On the bridge, Thor heard the warning. He hurled Mjolnir one last time, scattering the debris Vader was throwing, then leapt backward out through the shattered viewport. He fell for a heart-stopping second before Mjolnir returned to his hand, and he willed it to fly, arresting his fall. Tony shot out of a ventilation port on the ship's flank, grabbing onto Thor as he passed. "We need to be not here." They streaked away from the Executor just as the reactor breached. The explosion was silent in the vacuum of the high atmosphere, but on the ground, it was a second sun igniting. A sphere of white-hot energy consumed the Superstar Destroyer from within, vaporizing its central structure. The mighty vessel didn't so much crash as unravel, its bow and stern sections breaking apart, shearing into a million flaming fragments that scattered across the upper atmosphere and rained down into the Atlantic Ocean, miles from the coast. The telekinetic grip vanished. In Central Park, the release of pressure was instantaneous and catastrophic for its source. Darth Vader staggered as if struck by his own ship. The feedback through the Force was a psychic thunderclap. He dropped to one knee, his lightsaber deactivating and clattering to the ground. His respirator hitched, gasped, and then began a slow, labored rhythm. The shadow was gone. The sky was clear, lit only by the fading embers of the Executor. The Hulk saw his chance. "Now, Hulk smash!" he charged, but the Ancient One held up a hand. "Wait." The Sith Lord did not rise to fight. He remained on one knee, a monument of cracked armor and broken will. Through the Force, he felt it. Not just the loss of the ship, but the severing of a presence. A dark, guiding star had winked out. Emperor Palpatine's hologram had faded with the Executor's destruction. The connection was lost. For the first time in decades, Vader was alone. He looked up, his cracked lenses scanning the heroes surrounding him. The panting Hulk, the wary Thor landing beside him, the circle of sorcerers, the approaching Captain America and Black Widow, the exhausted Black Panther, and the battered Iron Man descending from the sky. He was surrounded. He was broken. His fleet was in disarray, his superweapon destroyed, his command ship vaporized, his master silent. Tony landed, his faceplate retracting to show a face smeared with soot and blood. "It's over, Vader. Your fleet's breaking apart. Your Death Star's gone. Your flagship is scrap metal. Surrender." Vader's damaged respirator wheezed. Slowly, painfully, he reached for his lightsaber. Every hero tensed, weapons raising. But his hand stopped halfway. He looked at the weapon, the symbol of his power and his servitude. Then his gaze lifted, not to the heroes, but to the sky, where the executor had been. He spoke, his voice a distorted, broken thing. The Empire is order. Without it, there is only chaos. He seemed to be speaking to himself. He promised peace. Peace through fear isn't peace, Steve said, stepping forward, shield ready. It's just tyranny with a different name. Stand down. This doesn't have to end with your death. Vader was silent for a long moment. The battle around them was dying down. The Imperial ground forces, seeing their command disintegrate and Asgardian warriors carving through their ranks, were surrendering or retreating to their remaining transports. With a final, rasping breath, Vader's hand fell away from his lightsaber. He did not pick it up. He simply knelt, his great helmeted head bowing in what might have been defeat, or perhaps the first act of a freedom he had never known. It is over. The words hung in the sudden quiet. The Galactic Empire's invasion of Earth had ended. The silence that followed Vader's surrender was not peaceful. It was the ringing, hollow quiet after the last gunshot, filled with the moans of the wounded, the crackle of fires, and the distant shouts of soldiers consolidating a victory that felt too immense to comprehend. Tony Stark's armor gave a final, protesting whine as the power cells died, leaving him standing in dead metal. He pried the faceplate off, dropping it to the scorched grass, and sucked in a ragged breath of smoky air. Okay, so we won. That's a thing that happened. Around him, the cost was laid bare. Central Park was a wasteland of craters, fallen trees, and the wreckage of Imperial and Wakandan craft. The skyline of Manhattan was scarred, with plumes of smoke rising from several impact sites, though the Ancient One's desperate cushioning spell and the Asgardian intervention had prevented total annihilation. The city was wounded, but it stood. Steve Rogers approached Vader, his shield held low but ready. The Sith Lord remained on his knees, a broken colossus. His cape was tattered, his armor was a web of fractures, and the rhythmic hiss of his respirator was uneven. Strained, he made no move to resist as a team of Dora Milaje, led by Okoye, cautiously approached, vibranium spears leveled. "Take him into custody," T'Challa ordered, his own suit retracting to reveal a face etched with fatigue and grief. "Treat his injuries. He will answer for what his empire has done, but he will do so alive and with dignity. That is not their way. It is ours." The Wakandan warriors expertly disarmed Vader, and removing his lightsaber and utility belt. As they moved to help him stand, he shrugged off their assistance with a final burst of pride, rising under his own power, though his stance was unsteady. He was led away, a silent, dark figure amidst the vibrant red of the Dora Milaje. Thor landed beside the group, Mjolnir hanging loosely at his side. He watched Vader go, his expression unreadable. A mighty foe brought low. There is no glory in this moment, only necessity. "The glory is in the people who stood," Steve said, clapping a hand on Thor's shoulder. He looked around at the gathering heroes. Natasha and Clint stood together, supporting each other. Bruce Banner, back in human form and wrapped in a shock blanket, sat on a piece of debris, looking dazed. Sam and Rhodey landed nearby, their armor smoking. When descending from the sky on a beam of shattered light came Odin Allfather, astride Sleipnir. The Asgardian host gathered behind him, their golden armor gleaming amidst the gray devastation. The old king looked weary, but his single eye burned with a fierce pride. "The day is won, my son," Odin said, his voice carrying across the clearing. "Midgard has proven itself worthy of its place among the 9 realms. You did not call for my aid until the last moment, and you fought with the courage of true kings. Asgard is honored to call you ally." He turned his gaze to the Ancient One, who stood quietly beside Wong, her yellow robe still pristine amidst the grime. "Sorceress, your power is ancient and strange. You have my respect and the respect of Asgard." The Ancient One bowed her head slightly. "Your intervention was timely, Allfather. The debt is owed." "There is no debt between defenders of the realms," Odin declared. He looked to the sky, where the remaining Imperial Star Destroyers were now surrounded by Asgardian vessels. "This Empire's forces are broken. Their will to fight here is gone. I shall oversee their repatriation." "Repatriation?" Tony asked, limping forward. "You're just sending them home?" Odin's gaze was steely. "They came from a rift between realities. That rift still exists, weakened but present. My sorcerers can force it open long enough to push their remnants through and seal it behind them. They will return to their own galaxy to face the consequences of their failure. That is a more fitting justice than slaughter." Steve nodded slowly. It was mercy, but a strategic one. A clean end. "Thank you, Allfather." Odin nodded, and then turned his steed. "We will speak again, Thor. The realms will need to be made aware of this new threat from beyond." With a flash, he and the bulk of the Asgardian army vanished in a rainbow torrent, leaving only a contingent to guard the Imperial prisoners and coordinate the withdrawal. In the days that followed, the world began the long process of digging out. The Battle of New York, as it came to be called, had been more devastating than the Chitauri invasion, but the victory was more complete. The Imperial fleet, leaderless and outmatched by Asgardian magic and technology, offered little resistance as they were herded toward the dimensional rift Odin's mages created near the moon. The captured Stormtroopers and officers were given the same choice: return through the rift with what ships remained, or face trial on Earth for acts of war. Most chose to leave. The rift was sealed behind the last Star Destroyer, a permanent scar in space-time that Odin promised Asgard would watch for eternity. On the 10th day, in a restored conference room in Stark Tower, the leaders gathered one last time. The mood was somber. Fury, his eye patch somehow seeming more permanent, laid out the facts. Casualty reports are heavy, but they could have been apocalyptic. Wakanda lost 700 warriors. SHIELD and national militaries lost thousands. Civilian casualties are in the tens of thousands, mostly from the initial bombardment before the shields were fully raised. He looked around the table. But we stopped a planet killer. We defeated an interstellar empire. The world knows what happened, and there's no scrubbing this one. The world also knows who saved it, T'Challa said. Not just the Avengers, not just Wakanda, Asgard, the masters of the mystic arts, the enhanced individuals in the streets, the soldiers who held the line, a united front. He paused. Wakanda's secrecy is forever broken. We have entered the world stage, not as observers, but as partners. That is the new reality. The Infinity Stones drew them, the Ancient One said quietly. She had decided to stay, sensing the balance of the universe had shifted. Palpatine sought power he could not comprehend. The rift is sealed, but the multiverse is vast. This will not be the last incursion. So we get ready, Steve said, his voice firm. Together, not as separate teams or nations, as a planet. The Avengers, Wakanda, SHIELD, the Sorcerers, Asgard, we coordinate, and we build defenses. We learn from their technology we captured. He looked at Tony. Tony, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, nodded. Already on it. Shuri and I are going through the wreckage of that AT-AT in Brooklyn. Their power systems, SHIELD tech. It's different. We can adapt it. Plus, he managed a faint smirk. "We now have definitive proof of extraterrestrial, extra-dimensional life that wants to kill us. That'll get the UN's attention." "What of the prisoner?" Natasha asked. "Vader. He was being held in a maximum security facility built with a combination of Wakandan vibranium cells and Kamar Taj's mystical wards. He had not spoken since his surrender. He is a resource," the Ancient One said, "and a danger. His connection to the Force is undimmed, only quiet. And he also represents a truth about the Empire we defeated. It was built on fear, but also on a warped desire for order. We must understand that if we are to prevent something similar from rising here." Bruce spoke up, his voice soft. "He's also a victim. I could feel it, even through the Hulk. There's immense pain there, physical and otherwise. He's more than just a villain." The meeting concluded with resolutions. A new global defense council, technology sharing, permanent alliances. The universe had sent its worst, and Earth had not only survived, but forged itself into something stronger in the fire. Later, Steve found Tony on the tower's balcony, looking out at the rebuilding city. "Never gets easier, does it?" Steve asked. "Winning, actually. This time it kind of feels like it might," Tony said, not turning around. "We didn't just beat the bad guys, Rogers. We built something while doing it. That's new." He finally looked at Steve, his eyes serious. "He's still out there, you know. The Emperor. He felt that connection snap. He knows where we are now. And guys like him, they don't take losing well." "I know," Steve said, following his gaze to the stars. "Let him come. Next time, we'll be ready." Below them, New Yorkers were already clearing the rubble, stringing up lights, arguing about how to rebuild. Life, stubborn and resilient, went on. The Galactic Empire had invaded the Marvel universe, and it had learned that Earth's mightiest heroes were not just individuals. They were the heart of a world that refused to break. The shadow of the Imperial fleet faded from Earth's skies, but its passing left an indelible mark on the soul of the Marvel universe. The victory was not merely military, it was philosophical. The Empire's brutal calculus of power, order through absolute control, peace through overwhelming fear, had been rejected at a cost, but rejected completely. In its place, something fragile but potent had been forged. A coalition born not of conquest, but of mutual defense, respect, and shared sacrifice. Earth was no longer a backwater planet unaware of the cosmos. It was a veteran of a multiversal war, its name whispered now in the halls of Asgard and across the dimensional gulf, in the dark throne rooms of a wounded empire. The technology of two universes would now mingle in its laboratories. Its heroes had stood shoulder to shoulder with gods and sorcerers. The world had been baptized in fire and emerged not as a subject, but as a sovereign power with allies among the stars and guardians in the mystic arts. Yet, in the infinite tapestry of the multiverse, threads of darkness still stir. Emperor Palpatine felt the severing of his apprentice's presence, the destruction of his prized weapons, the humiliation of his might. Such an affront cannot, will not go unanswered. The rift is sealed, but a determined will can find other doors. And in a silent cell on Earth, a broken knight grapples with a freedom that feels like damnation, his destiny now inextricably linked to a world he tried to conquer. The battle is over. The war for Earth's soul is won. But the story of its place in a wider, wilder, and more dangerous multiverse has only just begun.